if all has gone to plan, this should be summoning insight. And this time, things might look good because I'm not controlling the camera or any of that shit. So my co-host, you probably used to think of him as one of the best analysts of all time, a sort of great mind for the game, one of the English language speaking world's premier thinkers. But actually, I was reliably informed he's an idiot. He doesn't even know anything about League of Legends. He predicted the wrong team to win a game. I mean, at this point, I'm not sure how he's ever going to come back from this. Maybe if he coaches CLG to first place in LCSNA, maybe he can claw something back. It's Monte Cristo, right?
Well, but we have to keep in mind that even coaching a team to first place in NA is like 12th best in the world. So, I mean, is that accomplishment even going to save me? I don't think so. My career is in the dumpster. No. I'm going to quit.
I mean, to be fair, even if Loco coached TSM to #1, I don't think it would really raise him that much in our minds. You know, so you got a point there. Okay. So our guest this week. Okay, let me think. Here's how I'd describe her. So I always like to give people my perspective on the world. Okay, Probably the best English language caster who also looks like they're trying to be a character on Sons of Anarchy. That would probably be the most fair description, I believe. Some people, well, I say some people, about 10 people know her as an English language caster for LPL, and of those 10, 2 tune in every week to watch China Talk. And so to you 10 people, enjoy another episode with Froskurinn here. To all the people watching, 99% and the millions around the world and children and animals, this will be their first introduction. So the way I brought her on here, I'll just say hello first. Hello.
Hello.
So
that's all I got.
The reason I set this up, is like a lot of these episodes are, in one sense, they're a discussion about Chinese law, because I actually think it's quite important. I think it's the second best region. I kind of find it interesting, the difference in philosophy and how they play to different regions. It's kind of distinct in all the different regions, except NA, which is just doing shit that other people do not as well. And so what I like to do, though, is I like to discuss that anyway. But then I also like to have my own hidden reasons for bringing people on. And so some of these episodes, I kind of think of them as like sort of an intervention for Monte, because when he talks about the Chinese players in Chinese League of Legends, I hear this kind of tone at the back. And even when he gives them a compliment, I hear this sort of like a backhanded quality in there. And I just feel like, it sounds like he's like a disappointed uncle. Like, it's not his own kid, so he can't totally love them like he should, have that paternal bond. But he's just a disappointed uncle. It's like, I thought you were cool, I knew you when we were kids, when World Elite were on top. Like, you seemed like you were going to come up and do some big things, and look at you now. Like, you're just a disappointment, and maybe we should just keep our distance. So the idea here is Froskurinn, whether she will actually live up to these convictions or not, and I dare her to, obviously thinks there's good things in China. She probably thinks they have some good teams and some interesting style. Monte doesn't think any of those things. So let's put those two worlds together and then just see what happens when worlds collide, as I believe Power Man 5000 said. So let's start in China, okay? We're in China right now, Monte. The place we need to start is let's just start with some stereotypes, because I know Monte hasn't seen tons of LPL this season. So the stereotype for Froskurinn that I'm reliably told, it's still true, okay? In the history of LPL, someone bought the 3rd ward ever bought last week, right? And they placed it on the map, and they were like, oh shit, I can see that part of the map. And then someone was, there's a team fight going on, get over here. And then it turned out it was a waste, actually. He was disciplined by his coach later. It's like, isn't this true? There's like no warding goes on, right? Even now, no warding.
We make the joke all the time that you literally can't buy wards. They're so far behind in patches that it's just not available to them. That said, in the last week of LPL, we saw some fantastic warding. I think they've been watching Korea, but it was by the 2 worst teams in LPL when they shut down the 2 top teams. I'm talking about Young Glory and World Elite Academy versus OMG and EDG. And that was probably the saddest day in LPL, because you wanted to be so happy that, oh my God, look at that Baron Gate ward, and they don't see it with the pinks, and they swept everything out, and they go and dumpster the first place team.
So the thing is, whenever there's a circle jerk like that, like everyone says someone doesn't do something and everyone gets on board, the thing that the hipsters do is they don't think it through and come up with some radical idea. They just go reverse quickly. They go if I can just get ahead of it and go reverse, then... So basically, everyone always made sarcastic comments, this split, oh, actually, everyone says there's no warding, but there is. In general, has it improved? Has vision control become something that's become an emphasis now?
Yes. Be that the Korean influx of the players or the coaches or whatever it is, if playing more on the Korean server, there is definitely the really unique thing about Chinese League of Legends is I feel that there's so many different metas taking place in the exact same region. Like you have the teams that are still very much kind of that classic China. You talk about like typical aggression, tower diving, don't care, go ham. But then you have these teams that are developing a different style that's more pick-based, map pressure, controlling vision, sweeping that out, and things like that. As Monte likes to say, rotating-based teams.
Sure. So Monte.
Well, I mean,
one of
I've
his
seen
famous slams, was this one from All Stars where you set it up for us, Monty. What was your view of China? Right, it was that they were terrible and they didn't understand how to rotate and close games out.
Yeah, pretty much. That was it. I mean, just watching OMG at the time, you could tell that from watching LPL that neither team really knew when they had timing windows to take certain objectives even. And then on top of that, the information that they had to even make those decisions was not there due to low visibility. But I would agree that in the games that I've seen, now I didn't see any of the games from this past weekend because I was in Busan for the Champions Final, just like I haven't seen the last stage of the EU LCS yet because I only got back last night. But from previously, I watched the, I tend to like cherry pick my LPL games, generally speaking. So I watched the Starhorn versus EDG series, and in general, warding in those games was significantly improved from earlier in the season. I also have to say that as for the Young Glory stuff, I mean, it's probably good that they didn't get it together early on, because then we would have had to face the scandal of 2 of their players not being able to go to Worlds.
I'm still on the fence about if it's clarified, because last I heard LGD also initially their AD carry wasn't going to be able to go to Worlds, and then that got changed at the last second.
What?
Yeah.
Did he magically
He magically grew 2 years.
Yeah, really?
I feel like that can happen in some countries, Monty. Like I'm thinking Russia, China. I feel like a birth certificate could change to make you be old enough suddenly.
It would definitely happen in China.
It never happened in the Chinese Olympics, let me tell you that.
Who? There's a top laner right now in LSPL Snake who's 14 years old, and this was the team that did a Korean boot camp. They effectively came in, and then they took the team for like a few months, and they sent them over to Korea just to play, and now they finally have come back, and I believe they're number 2 in LSPL, and since LPL is growing, they're going to be in LPL next year, and there's a lot of hype surrounding this kid. But this is a 14-year-old kid that's, been boot camped through this gaming infrastructure, through these corporations, so...
Yeah, I mean, I was in a very confusing conversation with, as soon as that 17-year-old rule was released, I was told by Riot that, of course, in OGN, there had been a rule that you had to be 17 years old. Only the issue was that there were players playing in this season that were under 17 years old. So I don't even, still to this day, know what exactly went on there. But for winter and spring, there were players under 17 years old that were playing. Obviously, Korea has that age system where you're 1 when you're born, and on the new year, you become a year older. So it's on December 31st, you can be 2 when you're 1 day old and all of that other stuff. So that's maybe part of it, but I'm still not entirely sure, because rarely is that system used in Korea for actually official things, right? For
they just use the Western age for the official
Yeah.
Okay.
But these guys I found instances of multiple players who were under 17 in the winter and spring seasons. So I don't know what the rules are anymore with this stuff, and if there is somebody on LGD who's under 17, I'm curious about that as well. We should get some Reddit detectives on that.
The last I heard, he had been clear that a video 2 years ago put him as 18, but if you look at that kid, he is...
He had been cleared. Okay. So so it's a Chinese thing where they're just clearing him internally in suspicious methods. All right. Fair enough.
So I have another question of another stereotype, which is everyone thinks that, in the same way as everyone used to think every good EU team had to have some superstar mid laner, otherwise they couldn't be the best. That's what all the EU teams were based around. People still to this day think, and I'm obviously setting this up where I know it's not true, that every Chinese team has to be tower diving at level 2, and they have to be going absolutely ham the whole time, and that's all they do. Now, obviously there's certain teams, I mean, OMG maybe, where they do have an aspect of this, Starhorn. How would you see the landscape overall? Is that trend still holding true? How varied is the scene?
And this is what I was talking to earlier. there's like different metas inside LPL that are kind of emerging. The top teams, OMG, Starhorn, Royal Club, they've branched out their style, so they're more versatile. They can play that hard aggressive. It's almost like at the very beginning of the split, Starhorn was kind of stalling out. They couldn't find their footing, and then suddenly they just decided to go ham with inSec. Like anytime inSec does something crazy, they just like follow him up, and for whatever reason, it just works for them. OMG is much more pick-based now. Map pressure control, but teams like Young Glory, teams like Invictus Gaming, like the IG sisterhood, I guess, they are still very much, see hero, kill hero, chase them across the map. But there is definitely different styles evolving it. And that statement of just Chinese aggression, tower diving, it doesn't really exist anymore just because the Chinese meta has been changing so quickly and so rapidly.
When you say that, though, that actually just... Okay, those are positive things that they've evolved to this level, but that still makes it sound like they're like 3 months or 6 months behind because they've just got to the pick. Oh, now we're using pick comps. Oh, and you should probably like map pressure a little bit. Isn't this like what everyone else was doing like 6 months ago, 8 months ago?
Yeah, but I mean, how the Chinese go about it, like the one thing that I think is very unique, and if I were ever... I have to make this disclaimer that I in no way believe that China will go and win Worlds. So unfortunately, if you're looking for that big smackdown, it's not going to happen. We've said that several times, my colleagues and I throughout China Talk, throughout all of our platforms that we're given for LPL. I am much more optimistic about kind of the smaller facets that China will match up with Korea. The West, though, NA, EU, the fact that those teams are pretty much, they've almost come down to Korean copycats and trying to build this meta and as far as vision and rotating. China, we've seen instances of that where it's kind of the vision game, but it's still very different as far as understanding compositions and putting compositions together. And I think that's what makes them incredibly unique and what makes them incredibly exciting, particularly movement speed. So you have to think the 4VO meta initially kind of at the very beginning of the season was very popular in China. It was one of the first regions to actually pick that up. And in that meta, all these towers got pushed down so early. Like the game at 20 minutes had like 0 towers. And so for the first time in League of Legends, you had so much room to run. And they were really quick at picking up these champions or using champions like Lulu, like Skarner, these champions that have these movement speeds and just like chasing people down and running people around. And it kind of evolved into like a map pressure game, but with a 5v5 comp twist on it, if that makes sense. So there definitely is threads of them paying attention to what the other regions are doing globally. But it has its own little unique isolation to it.
Right, we're just going to go to a quick break here, and then we will return and hopefully continue this conversation. We're down to 2. It's like an Agatha Christie murder novel or something here, One of us obviously killed Monte, but that won't be revealed until the end of the show, hopefully through some discussion about League of Legends. So we're talking about China there, and I forget exactly roughly where we are when we had to go to that break. So while Monte's not here, let's just talk about the stuff that actually wouldn't have been super interesting in anyway, which is let's talk about some of the teams. So actually, I want to kind of start in reverse order of the teams of importance in LPL. I don't want to start with like EDG and OMG, which are the obvious premier teams that you want to talk about at the very top, because then it has implications to Worlds. I actually want to start with World Elite, because World Elite is the name, okay? It's like the Manchester United of LPL. And this season, they looked actually quite good. They looked like it was like the return of WeiXiao was back. He was actually pretty good again. And wow, maybe they're going to sneak in the playoffs, and they can maybe they're going to battle for that third spot for Worlds. And what happened to World Elite? What was the rise, and what's happened since?
It's pretty funny that you were like, let's start at the bottom, World Elite. Okay, you are correct. World Elite looked really good initially. And I just want to create this backdrop because I feel like a lot of the Western fans, they don't really realize kind of the context and the narratives of these teams. Like, you have to think that I ask people all the time, why don't you watch LPL? And they'll sometimes say, I like the narratives of the NA players, and LPL doesn't have that, or I like the I don't find it as interesting. OGN's like much higher level, but the narratives of these teams, especially World Elite, is insane. It's like leaps and bounds above anything that North America can really provide. You have to understand that World Elite is the people's team. People who don't play League of Legends in China, they know who the World Elite people are. You're on the League of Legends client, and you get like the free little avatars, and it's like these little chibi champions like Caitlyn and thing, and you get like the free World Elite icon. That's the people's team. It's completely run by fan donation. So this is a massive popularity. World Elite did their Korean Hail Mary. They picked up 2 new members. They benched their jungler, Ruo, due to, I think it was because he wasn't interested and he wasn't practicing enough, but there was some conflict there. And they benched their mid laner, Sukum, and they picked up Ninja, and they picked up Axine. And we talk about this all the time. It was kind of like the puppy theory. Communication obviously is going to be a big issue if these players don't speak Mandarin or don't speak English. So they already knew that they were going to be replacing their jungler. So they replaced their jungler, and they're like, well, we can't have a Korean jungler that can't communicate with the mid laner. So they then go and replace their already really good mid laner. Like, there's a viable argument that Sukum is actually a better mid laner than their current Korean mid laner, Ninja. But they had to have that communication there. And literally the very first game of LPL, we didn't know if Axine and Ninja were going to be playing in it because they had like just landed, and you have this mental image of literally the Korean players like running through the airport, rushing to get to the stadium so they can play in their first LPL Premier game. So they get there, and it's the first time that the team has like really scrimmed together. It's on the professional stage. It's the opening weekend. I believe that they were against their sister team, World Elite Academy. Ninja plays Twisted Fate and absolutely bombs. Like, you have zero communication built up with this team, zero synergy, and you're going to pick like the most map pressure-oriented champion probably available in League of Legends. It was just like a complete disaster. Slowly but surely, though, like WeiXiao, he is the shot caller of the team. They just kind of build up this very specific formula. I talk about it a lot in the cast, and literally, if you watch any of World Elite's games, they do the exact same thing every single time for victory. They put Ninja, they like, Twisted Fate, that's obviously not your bag, so we're just going to throw you on Lulu, on Orianna, on utility-based mids, and you're just going to sit in your lane and play safe, and we're going to transfer all of your power, and we're going to put it on our AD carry WeiXiao for late game. And they were going up, they were rising, they were doing fine. WeiXiao was having like the split of his life. He was looking amazing. And then they came into, it effectively was a super week for LPL. Now, LPL doesn't have super weeks like North America and EU, but they had a weekend where they literally played 3 games or 3 sets of games. So that's 6 games back to back to back. I don't know if this was an issue of prep time, that they maybe just didn't have the time to look at so many teams, if they weren't used to that, if it was the meta shifting out of their favor, but they had a chance at taking 6 games, and this was right off of IEM Shenzhen, where they finally beat EDG, which is like their rivalry team, and they just shit the bed. I think they went 1-5, and from there it was kind of the downfall of World Elite. I don't know if other teams started figuring them out, but Salmei was having the split of his life, and it all just came crashing down after that. Ninja could never, I'm just like thinking back to everything that really went wrong for them. I definitely do think it was the meta shift. The lane swap was really popular at the time. And again, we talk about the really specific formula that World Elite needed to win, is that they needed to get a lane swap with WeiXiao. So he gave that single solo experience and solo farm and kind of build up into this hyper carry. And and allow Conan to roam because he's just not a very mechanically adept support. And when the meta shifted back to traditional lanes, like they just took a dive. And it wasn't because WeiXiao wasn't playing well. Like actually, if you watched the Demacia Cup the other day, they played against Positive Energy. WeiXiao played Vayne. He looked, amazing. He looked like he could compete with someone like Deft, like Imp, like NaMei. It was fantastic to watch, but unfortunately his team just cannot compete with him. Be that synergy issues between the two new Korean players, be that his lackluster support for giving him that power in lane, but for whatever reason, didn't pan out for them. And they just got schooled by a pretty silly tiebreaker to lose their playoff spot, which means they completely lose their shot at Worlds.
Okay, so, I mean, Monty says so he can jump in anytime he wants, but we're just discussing World Elite here and the fact that they had kind of like an up and down season because they had a time where they were looking like maybe they could even be like a third best team in China, and then at the end they dropped off a bit. Obviously, whenever you talk about World Elite, you want to know about the big name, which is WeiXiao. Now, the storyline I have in my head is that, okay, at one point in time when World Elite were the best team in the world, he was the best player, and therefore...
IPL 5.
In a sense, he was the de facto best player in the world, okay? He was the best AD carry, and at the time, he did look like the perfect AD carry. The storyline of World Elite dropping off is, funnily enough, along those lines. It's not just that the team dropped off and OMG overtook them and IG overtook them, it's that also WeiXiao himself seemed as though other people overtook him. Like, people think that, oh, Uzi and NaMei, these people, WeiXiao was still good, but they just took it to another level, Did you see it that way before now? Were they beyond him?
It's a very different play style. I've seen some really amazing things from Uzi and NaMei. It's just so hard because everyone, like you said, everyone has this stereotype of, Chinese aggression in Chinese teams, and it kind of extends to Chinese AD carries. But they have a very different set, and if probably WeiXiao, NaMei, and Uzi are probably the best kind of explanation of the different types of AD carries in China. Uzi is going to be that classic go ham, go hard, go home. Like you talked about Doublelift, how he's a cannon and he needs to be prepped. That's Uzi. Like you have to have a short leash on him. He's an incredible versatile weapon, but there is zero thought going upstairs. Like that is just, you wind him up and you let him go. WeiXiao, because he's the shot caller of his team, because he's been around for so long, and you have to think WeiXiao staked his claim on identifying that as an Ezreal, you don't arcane shift into the enemy team. Like that's his big claim to fame, that he recognized that first. When you watch him on a champion like Vayne, he's very controlled, he's very methodical, and he's almost overly cautious. He knows when to let loose, and you can see that that mentality there. NaMei is kind of like the hybrid between them. It's everything that's good about WeiXiao, that understanding of a situation, being able to read it and being able to make the great call, but also having the like balls to the wall aggression that Uzi can pull out.
So maybe I think you've probably actually begun to answer the question I was going to ask next, which is another stereotype, which, as far as I'm aware, is actually incorrect, is because of the storyline of Worlds, okay? Most people have only seen the Chinese teams when they go to Worlds. And so they saw, okay, OMG was on top. They heard that storyline, but they didn't get to see it until Worlds happens, and then OMG didn't go that far. So they saw Royal Club go to the final, and people think, oh, I guess Royal Club were just the best team in China. And also, as a result, they think, oh, I guess Uzi was the best Chinese player. Whereas from the games I've seen and the theories I've heard put to me, that sounded quite reasonable. It sounds like no one ever thought Uzi was the best AD carry, because his era of when he got really good was when NaMei was the best, right? Am I on point to that?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, Uzi, don't get me wrong, he definitely has his fan club and everything like that. But I mean, I talk about the trajectory of Starhorn a lot, and it's unfortunate because you're exactly right. As Starhorn, they're definitely going to Worlds. Like the regionals haven't happened, but I guarantee you 100% Starhorn will be representing China at Worlds. The Western fans are going to see Starhorn Royal Club, and they're going to be, oh, it's Royal Club. Where's Whites? Where's Tabi? Yeah, Tabi is my favorite. Oh, Uzi, I know who he is. But literally the trajectory was that Starhorn, took second at Worlds. Whites, their mid laner, and Tabe both retired, and immediately they just nosedived. And Uzi was the only consistent factor when the team was amazing and when the team was shit. They effectively gutted the roster then, got themselves two new solo laners, picked up inSec, and of course kind of the all-star that I'm going to claim most of their success to, Zero, their support. And now they're suddenly back on the rise pretty much at the very end. And initially, like when inSec and Zero joined Starhorn Royal Club, even when they had their new roster, at the very beginning of the split, it was pretty much a train wreck. Zero or inSec would go like try to invade a jungle, and you have to think like this is the big Korean jungler. He's supposed to, you know, show these Chinese junglers what's what and how's how. And I think it was the very first game he invaded at 3 minutes and he got first blooded. And I think it was by clear love too, like of all the junglers to die to.
So, and let's talk about that dynamic then, bringing in Zero and bringing in inSec, because like you say, the big name was inSec actually. In fact, a lot of people looked and said, why the fuck have they brought this Zero guy? Like, if there's one position you wouldn't change on the map, it's, well, first of all, it's jungler and support, but you would definitely not change the support when in theory you've got an all-star level AD carry, you know, because think how risky that is. This guy is going to have to speak to him in English and new synergy. And plus, it's not like if you ever watched when he used to be on KTA, he wasn't some like superstar support or anything, right? He was just an okay player.
Yeah, and I don't think
what's different in China, you think?
He played that many games. I think the issue was not necessarily Zero's performance in Korea. I'm trying to remember how many competitive games he played for Korea. I believe it was very few, and I think one of them was actually as a mid laner. I think the issue was not that Zero was ever a bad player, but just that it was kind of the issue that that a lot of Korean players probably find themselves in. They have such a massive talent pool, and when you have like those all-stars that are filling the starter spots, it's so hard for these players who are legitimately very good to kind of overcome. And Zero really found his synergy in Starhorn Royal Club, and he's definitely been the turning point for that team. At the very beginning, it was almost like there was two different teams in Starhorn Royal Club. There was Zero and inSec, and then kind of the rest of the team. You would constantly see them play Lee Sin and NaMei, and it would be this issue of inSec would like kick someone back into like a waiting NaMei bubble, and the two of them would actually pick up free kills in the jungle, and meanwhile the rest of Starhorn just kind of like tooling around in the jungle, not really doing anything. That started to even out and merge it out, but you definitely see that there were communication issues. I know that there's a Mandarin teacher, though, that's teaching them the language inside the gaming house.
Well, in terms of Zero, then, how would you compare him to actual Korean, Chinese supports, rather? Like, if like the best Chinese support in theory is fzzf, fzzf, or however you say his name, right? I think you can't hear me. Okay, we'll go to another commercial break here. Thanks, guys. Okay, so we will now attempt to continue our conversation. And so what the question I was trying to ask you was, most people would assume fzzf is supposedly the best Chinese support, right?
Probably Chinese. Yeah.
Yeah, sure, Chinese, but I'm saying because now I want to ask, how would you compare Zero to him and the other Chinese supports? Is he different in any sense?
Yes, he understands disengage. Be that from a Korean background of playing that champion, specifically NaMei. That was the first champion that he really showed in LPL to proficient level. And for whatever reason, and fczf is actually probably one of the better supports at this disengage concept, just because Morgana was his most played champion last split in spring. Zero just understands that completely different. It's an awareness thing. It's an understanding the when to pick a perfect fight. There are constant just outplays on NaMei alone. Thresh on Zero is incredibly proficient. fczf, unfortunately, for a long time, I really admired his Alistar play. Like when I first started watching LPL, I believe it was a game that I saw fczf playing Alistar, and I was just like, oh man, that's amazing. That guy's so good. He's so good at recognizing when team fights are and engaging for his team and causing it, which he is kind of the master. They call him the master tactician. But for whatever reason, I don't know. I think it kind of just has to do with EDG being in a personal slump, but he started to slip back. But as far as context, Zero is just more of a versatile support.
So does that make Zero the de facto best support at the moment in China?
I would say so, yeah. I think that
yeah.
Starhorn Royal Club has the best bot lane right now in China as far as a 2v2, which is I cannot emphasize this enough. Western teams, whoever is facing Starhorn Royal Club's bottom lane, even the Korean teams, you have to be very careful. It's a very terrifying lane.
Does that is it too much of a jump in logic to say, oh, well, if Zero can come in and he wasn't even thought of as like a great player in Korea, and now he's the best in the Chinese region, that in some way the Chinese players are lacking in whatever sense you need for a support player?
You have to think about how they think about the game. So when the supports initially got changed, all those big changes coming at the beginning of the season, they all, like, internationally, everyone was saying, oh, the AD carries are awful now. They're in the worst place that they've ever been, because not only can these bruisers come and just kill them, whatever, but the supports now, because there's this influx of gold, can just come in and murder them. The Chinese literally thought the opposite. They were like, hey, our supports are stronger. That must make our AD carry stronger. And that's kind of always been like this hard engage, protect the AD carry mentality coming from them. And Zero just brings this just completely different versatility. I keep saying that because that's really what it is. He's just able to play the disengage. He's able to play the hard engage to match with the Koreans. As far as just, sending over any other player, I just have to emphasize that, to me, Zero, just watching him perform, he isn't just any other player. I just think he got really unlucky for the roster that he was on to not take a starting position. I by no means think that he's a B-rated player, especially for the performance that he's shown in LPL, and he'll finally get to show that on the world stage, that he's not this B-rate Korean, which I think a lot of the Korean players have kind of gotten this label of as they come over into China.
Realistically, because when I said working from the bottom, I meant as in of the relevant teams. Like, to me, I don't give a fuck about the teams who finished last place and can win like 2 games. Who cares, right? Within any region. So if we keep moving up, we've done a bit about Starhorn there. The team who's kind of sandwiched between World Elite and Starhorn is LGD, this team who's sneaked into the playoffs now. Realistically, since their name hasn't really been mentioned within all these other bigger names that had some reason to be up there, are they actually got any chance of getting to Worlds? I mean, the format's pretty hard if you're not actually the third best team, right?
Yeah, all of my other colleagues, they were kind of really hard on OMG just because of their recent slipping. I still think OMG is going to take the spot. I'm not ready to completely discount them out. I still personally believe that it's going to be EDG, OMG, Starhorn Royal Club. LGD is very interesting, though. They're a very smart team. Like, when we talk about those stereotypes again, the stereotype is that the Chinese teams don't really understand strategy, that it's like, god tier level of mechanics with bronze 5 strategy, and that's somehow where China LPL is. But LGD is almost kind of completely the opposite. It's really smart strategy, but like mechanically across the board, some of their players aren't as proficient as the other Chinese teams. And it's almost like what you see in LMQ. Like when LMQ wins in North America, they don't ever win strategically. They just win because they just brute force wins. They're just better players mechanically. And that's kind of what happens to LGD. Either they personally throw because PYL loses control on WeiXiao, or hit their new mid laner and he just goes, way too hero and dies, or they just get beat in situations that they shouldn't. That said, I do believe that LGD has kind of a factor of a lot of talent, particularly in their bot lane. I feel bad now because as we were talking about the supports, fzzf and Zero, I completely didn't even talk about PYL, which I think he's an amazing support as far as LPL. In fact, I would probably say he's better than fzzf right now. Zero's level, it's really debatable. PYL is very versatile, though. He's also the shot caller for his team and the captain. But the other big thing is XQ, his AD carry, which give that guy maybe 3 splits, he is going to be a world-class AD carry, not just in China, but in the global context. That guy is incredibly good.
When you look at LGD and Royal Club, is Royal Club a level above LGD? I mean, if you're saying OMG's on a slump, it sounds like Royal Club's going to slide into the second spot, right?
Yeah, Royal Club I definitely think is performing right now better than OMG. LGD, watching their 2 games, they're actually really close when they play Starhorn Royal Club, and it's a very different play style than some of the rest of the LPL teams. Again, it's that thought process. Starhorn is really good about they won't do nothing for no reason. There are some LPL teams that, again, it's that see hero, kill hero mentality, chase them across the map. The reason why Starhorn has been separating itself is because they still do that. They still go crazy ham, almost like Mac Noon diving 4 towers, but they do it for a reason. They want something, either it be a dragon, a blue buff, a tower, a baron. They don't just go ham for no reason. It's, I would say, kind of KT Arrows-esque, if you're going to make that comparison. And LGD is... they're very reactionary, so watching those 2 teams play is really exciting because Starhorn will go ham and they'll do something, but LGD will always counter. And some LPL teams, they just completely drop the ball and they just don't know what to do, and these advantages just start snowballing. But LGD is very good at bouncing back and saying, if something's happening on the map here, then we just need to be here, which, it sounds really basic, but even top teams in NA and EU struggle with that.
Okay. We'll take another short break and hopefully Monty will join us, or it'll just be a 2-man show. We'll see how it goes. Back soon. It's that time of the night again for like who knows how many times, but we will endure to the end, Monty. I feel like Churchill right now. Yeah, we will fight them on all levels, Monty. We will endure, and those ignorant bastards will never take over this world.
That's right. Anyway, we'll endure their DDoSing. We'll endure their chat Hitlers. We go through it all. We're the heroes the LoL scene deserves, right, Duncan?
Nah, I've always thought of myself that way. So. We've been working our way through the LPL teams, Monty, but in lieu of you not being here, I thought to myself, like, I'll work in reverse, because these are all the teams that proportionally Monty cares less and like a little bit more about gradually as we work our way up. We're not even near the top, Monty, so you weren't missed so far, don't worry. We've only gotten to LGD, and we talked a little bit about Starhorn, but let me bring you in on that. So when I was talking to Froskurinn about Starhorn, obviously a lot of the emphasis was on Zero, and it was on inSec. Now, she was telling me, in her opinion, she would actually put Zero as the best support in the whole region now. And yet, let's face it, in Korea, right, he was nobody. Do you get, without retroactively doing this, Monty, he did play a bit and he played in like the not good versions of KTA, but let's not, I want you to be fair on this, okay? I don't want you to rewrite history like, oh, I guess he was just on the cusp of becoming a really amazing support, and if he'd just stayed one more split, like, realistically, was he ever going to be a really top level player, do you think, in Korea?
I actually think he could have been. And when he was playing with the KT Bullets, he played some games in lieu of Mafa. And it was very interesting because his support Vel'Koz and his Leona were very good. He also played some games in the jungle that were horrible. But his support play, I think, was improving, and the KT Bullets were showing that they were willing to put him in. And he also was there on the same team as inSec as well. So it's they knew each other going into this. And he's a really young player, too. So I think that he could have been a rising support. It would have been really difficult to tell at the time, but he definitely had some solid games. Okay, so I actually think that as far as the players that went over to China, he was like not like inSec. You could make a really good case was kind of washed up. I mean, we talk about this, but in the KT Bullets, like when he went back to the jungle, he was 14th out of 14 in KDAs. In Masters, like he was the bottom KDA of all junglers in all 14 teams in Masters. And sure, KDA isn't everything, but I think that says something when you're 14 out of 14 and your team really isn't performing very well. And he's a very mechanically skilled jungler, but he's always had the problem of being overzealous in terms of his engages and going in way before the rest of his team and not having so much of a plan as to how he's going to actually fight the enemy. So I do think that he's stabilized a bit. Maybe he was just slumping, but I don't think he's ever going to be like a top-tier jungler again because we've moved into the stage of the game where the jungler has to be so communicative and intelligent and inside the other jungler's head that I just don't see him as a player that he's going to be able to come back from that.
No,
okay, so Froskurinn, I know on the cool kids table in fucking China, it's still okay to bag on inSec even though he's doing super well. He's a pretty good jungler in LPL, right?
No. he's pretty awful. I will say one thing, though, to counter Monty's point, is that I think that the synergy is much better. Like, literally, I think that there was a switch that they just flipped. They're just like, inSec's going to go ham no matter what. That guy's going to try to feed as hard as he can. We should just follow him and see what happens. I mean, inSec, when he was on the Bullets, was kind of known as the playmaker for the team, you know, when he had that short stint of not being bad. And I think that's kind of what's happening for Starhorn right now. The issue, and I think you touched on a very important point as well, is how jungling has really changed, especially at the top levels of play, what jungling is really about right now. And that is the #1 weakness of LPL. If I were to just hammer down where LPL is going to get beat, it's going to be in the jungle. We have some impressive junglers, but in a very limited context of the role right now. Like, I'll even talk about Clearlove, which, as a jungler, Clearlove is an awful jungler, but that's not his purpose in the team. He's more of like a fifth man, essentially. Like, they just have him there for team fighting, and he spends his time with the camps, and then suddenly he comes out, and he's just like this amazing aspect for their team fight phase, but as a jungler, it's awful. And the fact that inSec gets to even be classified as a top-tier jungler in LPL is pretty telling of the region's weakness.
So, Monty, let's just take a step back from the meta and the current world, and let's just think on like a conceptual level about how to compose a team and how to play League. Okay, as things are right now, if these are inSec's problems and his only strength is essentially he's mechanically very good, if that's his only strength, okay, admittedly, that's not what is required right now of a jungler, and that won't fit into a team that can be the world champions, okay? But if we were stepping back and we were just thinking conceptually outside of the meta, you can have players who are just brilliant skill players, and if you put enough other parts around them, they could still function, right? They could still be good, actually. Like, for example, we always make the criticism people give of certain players is they always call the jungler, or it's up to them when the jungler has to come to their lane. If we put some genius level top and mid laner around inSec who had really good decision making and could tell him when to come, could he still be viable in that sense?
Yes, but here's the kicker. In this situation, inSec would need a person in every single lane constantly giving him lane updates and like telling him where to go, so he wouldn't have to think. Now, it's hard to find one person in every single lane who will do that automatically of themselves. Typically, the easier way to run things in comms is to have your jungler constantly asking for lane updates and talking about where he is and where he's going. So you basically, the only way to remove all decision-making power from the jungler is to like have 3 or more of your teammates step up, and it has to be, it can't be your AD and support at your mid lane. It has to be top, mid, and then either your AD or support, right? So that's like a tall order to fill, and at that point you have to ask yourself, is this jungler actually worth it?
Is it worth it? Yeah. Okay, no,
that's just the jungler not doing their job effectively. Like, it's the jungler's job to have game management in the early game, to ask the questions of the laners, because the jungler won't always know, and typically doesn't know, as I found talking to junglers, how exactly lane matchups work in every lane, like, because he doesn't play those roles most of the time, and he certainly doesn't play them at the highest competitive level either, when there are differences obviously between, the jungler plays mid sometimes in solo queue, the matchup at the competitive level can be wildly different. So it's up to the jungler to say, hey mid, how's this matchup going for you right now? Can you push out so that I can invade their jungle and get some deep wards? And the mid has to say, yes, I can do that. Or, hey, support, we're in a 2v1. Do you have an opportunity to come into their jungle to get some wards with me? Can we do a little invading? Can we go to their blue buff right now? Can you push up? Can you do this? Blah, 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 blah. And it's like, that's kind of the jungler's job at this stage. Like, pretty much on every team, that's kind of the jungler's job. And yes, there is a way around that, but it would require... It's just like not worth it. Like, you have to just kind of like bend the circuitry of the entire team in order to do that.
Okay, so if that's the case, Froskurinn, you just said that he's a terrible jungler, but then you pretty much bagged on all the other Chinese junglers. How is Starhorn using him within LPL that works in any sense? How is this not such an overwhelming burden that it's dragging him down? Sounds like they're actually doing pretty well with him.
I think the one jungler that's probably the best jungler in LPL is Drug Alan Loveland, but consistency is an issue. As far as utilizing inSec in particular, I mean, I talked about, again, how kind of in the last split, let's take kind of his last 2 games. He faced top teams, and he played Rengar, I believe, in both sets. The very last set that they have, it was against EDG, and his jungler that he was across from was Clearlove. If you know anything about Clearlove and you ever watched it, like, he literally doesn't jungle. It's his best champion is Evelynn, literally because he needs to be on an invisible champion to put map pressure anywhere. Like, he just doesn't do anything. He just farms, plays Jarvan, and he like is in the jungle for 15 minutes without ganking anything. And so the fact that inSec looked so good that game, playing Rengar against like pretty much a non-existing opponent, I think was kind of a big it elevated him or inflated his performance and how he looked that game. In the OMG versus Starhorn Royal Club games, looks very, very different. I think that there's good communication between him and Zero. Again, the fact that they have that language going for them. But when he has really successful ganks, it's actually on the bottom lane, particularly when he does play Rengar, of course, stealthing into the back of the lane and setting that up with Zero. But again, that goes back to there's almost like 2 facets inside Starhorn Royal Club. There's Zero and inSec, and then there's kind of the rest of the team. He doesn't really find a lot of successful ganks anywhere else. When he ganks for their mid laner, Corn, it really doesn't go anywhere. So all of inSec's success is usually found either in like a pick or a fight, or it's found in that bottom lane.
So let me set up kind of like the topic here then. I asked you some questions about players before, like how the support roles played, and you always talked about like how the Chinese players see that role or how they think it's supposed to be played. So along these lines, it's easy for people on a grand stage, like we've done here, to just like conceptually pick apart what is wrong here and what they aren't doing right. But when you go into the real world, even if you could tell all of this to Curse from America, like this is how all their problems, it doesn't necessarily mean that if you put Curse against them, they could exploit those problems, okay? They might still get beaten by
they won't.
mechanically outplayed and all that. So what I want to ask is this, like, if we don't go that extreme, are you saying, okay, if I could take Dandy and tomorrow I put him in LPL and he can speak Chinese and he can talk to his teammates, first of all, his teammates would be like, holy fuck, how does this guy know where to go and what to do? And he would just destroy the other team. He would just pick them apart.
Most of the teams, yeah, I think a good Korean jungler, Kakao, Dandy, Spirit would just waltz through LPL.
Why do you think LPL hasn't realized this then? What is it what's the conceptual gap they're missing?
I think a big issue is the influx of junglers that we had. So you have to think that the mid lane makeup of LPL has shifted drastically this split, as well as the junglers. You have two new teams coming in. So you have all those new members that you're competing with coming up from LSPL, and LSPL has more teams in it. So LSPL, when you actually watch their matches, they almost have more strategy in it, just because you have so many more influences coming in, so many more players. You know, if you think of like a creative pot, there's so many more people throwing ideas out into that, and certain things start to evolve, and you start to see certain strengths. But the big issue is the mid lane matchup is drastically changed. You have Korn. What is it? Out of 8 teams, only 2 mid laners stayed the same from the previous split, and that's Zatai and Yu. But, Cool coming off of retirement. Korn's brand new. Wayless is brand new. The jungle, since we returned to traditional lanes, it's again almost that 2v2 matchup, the jungle mid laner instead of the 4v0. So that's a big influence about it. The junglers themselves changing, the fact that probably the best Chinese jungler is, again, Loveland Allen, the fact that he's back on jungle. Like, he always supports for the spring. That's a big issue. So they've kind of been stunted to the growth that they've never had, like, a consistent jungler to just sit in there and to learn everything.
Monty, when you looked at China in this sense, have you always thought this is something that at some point are they gonna have like a breakthrough and realize what they're doing wrong? Like, I mean, everyone else in theory, as much as you can say NA is bad, and they obviously are contextually compared to the Koreans, at least NA kind of tries to figure out what the Koreans are doing that they're not. And even if they can't always translate it, they gradually get edged closer, even if the actual overall gap gets bigger, they still edge closer towards the concept of what they're trying to do, right? So what is China missing, do you think, in that sense?
Well, I think that the biggest thing that China's missing is the Korean infrastructure. I think that we've talked about this before, but I don't think it's necessarily the right way to go to get Korean players who can't speak the language when you have to communicate so heavily and rapidly in game. But if you have a coach, maybe you can translate for him. And an interesting example of this actually comes from the GPL, because one of Najin's coaches is now the new coach for Taipei Assassins. And if you watch the GPL finals, I would say that the Taipei Assassins have improved dramatically. They 3-0'd AHQ. They're looking a lot better. They're going to Worlds. I would actually predict Taipei Assassins. I think they can take games off of maybe second and third NA and EU seeds at this point. They could be, like, they're not going to go deep in the tournament, but the improvement that we've seen over the course of this year in that team in particular, I think has been pretty impressive. And I think that's what a good infrastructure can do for you, and having bringing the coaches in from some of these other Korean teams.
But TPA lacks some of the mechanical aspects to be however good the strategical stuff gets.
Depending on certain positions, you could argue that. I think Wins, their jungler, is really good. I think he's mechanically.
But I mean, for
crazy.
example, TPA's AD carry isn't going to match up with any of these Chinese guys, right?
Probably not. But I'm just saying, all I'm saying is this is a team that we've seen improve in the macro game significantly by bringing over an established coach from the Najin organization. And I think that that's the way that China moves forward.
Okay. Okay, let's keep talking about the other teams then, because we're actually getting to the good teams now. So OMG, historically, they're like, after World Elite, they're like the Neo Kings of China. Okay, they're the team that's supposed to win, and they always have the great regular season where you think, right, they're going to win again. Why is OMG not only not the best team anymore for Froskurinn, why are they now maybe even not top 2 in your book?
I will put them top 2. I know most of my colleagues in kind of the Chinese scene would disagree with me just because they're so disappointed. What's very unique about OMG in context of the other LPL teams is that they actually, you think again, 80 carries, that's supposed to be the strongest point. They actually have probably the weakest bot lane. Definitely bottom tier in LPL. Partly to do, actually mostly to do with their support. But the fact that they have this all-star mid laner, like you have to think every other, when you just go down the line for OMG, they pretty much have the best player for every single position that LPL offers, except for their bottom lane. You have Cool in the mid lane, you have going in the top lane, you have Loveland in the jungle, and then it's like San and Tricky Boy. It's unique to me, but that's kind of the issue, and so I don't know if maybe OMG is being put down. I mean, obviously there's synergy issues going on, but the style of play in China, that everyone's diving the bot line, there's so much importance on that. I don't know if that would translate the same, like if their success right now would be different, in Korea even, or in NA or in EU, if it's just the type of game that's played in China that's keeping them down. And by keeping them down, again, this is a team that placed second, that pretty much had first the entire split, so
then why last season? You remember last season it was supposed to be OMG EDG in the final. What happened aside from getting IG'd? Like, was it really just like IG just magically became good for one day? What?
It was their mid laner. We cannot talk about this guy enough. Xiong just. Although they had Cool actually when they got unseated by IG, but he had just come off the bench. And he played Nidalee. It was awful, just really bad. But for most of that split, they had OMG is the creative driving force for LPL. If you think about a team that, like in NA, I'll use the example of Cloud9. I think Cloud9 for NA is kind of the driving force of creativity, bringing different strategies in, bringing different picks. OMG is like that for LPL. And when they picked up Xiong to take over their mid lane, this guy has like a kitty-sized champion pool. And he only knows one-dimensional play style, and it crippled OMG and it crippled the rest of LPL. They had nothing. They had no growth to aspire to. It was a very stagnant time for them, and I think that's really showing right now, especially in EDG, as the meta shifts away from that the lane swap 4VO, and it's more about getting the mid laner involved, and it's almost reminiscent of season 3, kind of again. Sweeping into an area, taking up all the vision, and then forcing the enemy to make a rotation into a vision-controlled area, and then making your play right then. We talked about, Faker using Ahri, all that classic charm over the Baron pit, taking objective off of that. But as we're sweeping back to that, it's exposing EDG and how stagnant and one-dimensional their play is, and I think that's left over from OMG having that long split where nothing happened in LPL.
Is there something you want to pick up on here, Monty?
I wanted to ask about what's going on with Cloud in OMG because, from your episodes of China Talk, usually he was talked about quite highly. So what's the reason why, if this has been a shift that OMG has chosen to make?
Toxic behavior for the team is my understanding. He was raging and causing a bad reputation for the organization, as well as bringing down internal players. I believe Allen specifically, their jungler, he was blaming a lot, and so it was just kind of a bad mesh and makeup inside the team. And I know Tricky Boy, Coma, Dada7, whatever you want to call him, it's like a beautiful bromance between him and San, and that's why they picked him back up. The issue though is that guy cannot hit a skill shot. He cannot play any champion. That said though, Cloud, yes, he has a fantastic Thresh and he looks godly on it, but he only plays Thresh. So you go into picks and bans phase, if you take that away from him, even though he had that great performance, the hype following him, it's an issue that San needs. He needs a Mata to hold his hand through lane. Otherwise, he just cannot survive it, and that's a big issue for OMG right now.
Okay, but Froskurinn, you remember, you and everyone else who's from the West and doesn't understand the Chinese mentality spent all these years saying, listen, I love Loveland. Love him as a support player. Love him as a jungler. There's no problem with him. Have him wherever you want. Just get this Pomelo guy the fuck out the door now. Like, if you could just please get rid of him, put Loveland jungle, I don't mind which. Well, you got your wish. Here you go. Be careful what you wish for, right? Because is it worse to have the Dada guy than have Pomelo? Really?
I would. Where is Pomelo? I want that guy in. I see him in the audience sometimes. I'm just like, please, Pomelo, jump back on stage, take your reign. This guy, he can't play Morgana, he can't play Thresh, he can't play Leona, and those are like the top 3 picks. And again, and it speaks to something about OMG, the fact that their weakest point is Son. And I know I'm giving him a really hard time, but in context globally, if we're eliminating the top 3 Korean teams, I don't think Son's that bad. Like, he shows up in teamfight phase, but the support role is definitely an issue on OMG right now, especially this close to Worlds. The fact that literally through regionals, I think Dada 7 has played maybe 4 games through the LPL season, and they're now going to pick him up through regionals as well as the qualifiers. And then going into Worlds, like the prep time and synergy that it takes to build with this guy, that's pretty concerning to me.
So how did OMG, in the past at least with their past bot lanes, how did OMG take over China if they didn't have the Beast AD carry? What style counters the Beast AD carry style?
Diving. I'm pretty convinced that when the Chinese AD carries show up and the Western teams face them, that the Western teams won't be able to really touch them, just because the compositions and how teams are built in China, it's all about diving that backline and getting a hold of that guy. And the reason why I love NaMei so much is when you actually watch him, you can tell that guy's going to throw the cask, right now if I just sidestep it. And he'll do this on champions like Kog'Maw, although I wish they would stop playing Lucian. Like, that's awful. But and OMG specifically, like, why they dominate so long is because they have the best top laner in China, probably one of the top laners in the world. Going is so impressive, and there are so many games, even when OMG was losing kind of this last split, like going on Aurelia, like, you give him an inch and that guy will take a mile. He just like forces his way in there. It's like 1v3, and I definitely put a lot of their success on that guy.
So I have a question. Why, out of all the supports that OMG could have taken, isn't Sika just like off, like doing nothing right now? Where did he go? Because that guy used to be pretty good.
Oh, he's so good. So I don't know the full details on this, although Positive Energy is a kind of sister organization of OMG, and Sika was on their roster, and effectively everyone suddenly left Positive Energy. They had you had Sika on their roster. There was kind of this thing on his Weibo saying, where his coach was like asking, like, your team needs you, Sika, you need to come back. And it had almost like a negative connotation that Sika didn't want to go back to the team. And there was kind of issues where OMG wanted to re-sign Sika's contract and keep him attached to the organization, but he was very standoffish about it. But there's definitely, I think, public animosity between those players and that org. And I think that has a lot to do with why we're not seeing Sika being picked up.
So if OMG was this exciting, they were the team who were willing to dive, and they kind of broke that Chinese meta of just have the really amazing AD carry who gets to the end of the game, then how the fuck do they then get reversed? And then a team comes along who does exactly that same thing again in ADG and just has the best AD carry and builds the whole team around, get this guy to the end of the game where he has 6 items, he kills everyone. How did it go back the other way? Shouldn't we have been evolving now for Froskurinn? We should have had good players at all positions.
I think it has a lot to do with the timing that EDG was created and birthed into LPL. Again, I have to go back to the 4VO meta. It was really potent in China for a very long time. And as soon as we're shifting away from that and different playstyles, and it's kind of forcing their mid laner, specifically you, and everyone will go and say, like, NaMei's the big star, obviously, that big AD carry in China, and he has this big reputation. But I honestly believe that Yu was the spine and the crutch and the backbone of EDG. And when they found a lot of their victories, it was because that guy played so consistently with his Ziggs and was able to stall it out. But it was a huge crutch for them. And now that, again, the meta has shifted, we're starting to see this weakness exposed. This guy doesn't leave mid lane. He literally just sits in it. He gets casted in, or he gets Ahri, and for 15 minutes, he's just, I got to farm these creeps. I got to make sure that I out-farm the Orianna across from me. But for the longest time, it was stall out the game, use Ziggs, wait for my AD carry to show up. I still believe that no team in LPL team fights as well as EDG, but right. On a global context, are they going to get to that point against these other teams, these top NA, top EU, top Korean teams? I don't think so.
No, they won't. And I think that's the scariest thing, too, is that maybe they'd find a favorable matchup against a team like Samsung Blue that has a weak early game. But if you put them against like the KT Arrows, that is not a team that's going to live past 25 minutes. Like
We'll
you have
steamroll them.
Yeah, I mean, the early game teams are very scary in that context, and especially like you're saying with the meta shifting back over, there's no more crutch they can really lean on in terms of wave clear because assassins will kill your wave clear mids at this point in time. So how are you going to deal with that? You probably aren't, and they're coming back into a phase where their weaknesses are going to be exposed. And I guess it's kind of disappointing because I feel like EDG had a period where they could have actually really addressed these problems while they were still like relying on some comfort picks, especially in practice sessions to try and switch things up and just kind of play their LPL games on the comfort picks. But apparently that's not really happening.
And it was awful too because we at the very beginning of the split we saw like a completely different EDG step out. They almost looked like they were evolving. They were putting you on assassin picks and he was kind of doing his job, but for whatever reason, I don't know if this was internal drama with the team, but they just completely went stagnant and kind of reverted back. But for I think the first 3 weeks of LPL, everyone was super excited about EDG because Clearlove was ganking and Yu was applying pressure on the map, and suddenly that all disappeared. The one bright spot that I will talk about, though, is Koro, their top laner, has looked fantastic. Like the rest of the team is just kind of going down the shitter and diving headfirst into not really mattering, but Koro is definitely stepping up.
Well, I've never been a Clearlove fan. I've always thought he wasn't a very good jungler, so.
He's not a jungler. He just he buys his time in there.
I think
he
creates like
Monty.
next to no pressure.
You picked the most extreme example, though, Monty. You picked KT Arrows, who themselves, we didn't even know if they were an elite team until probably this weekend. People might have still placed them outside of their top 3, their top 4. It was questionable as to whether they would even be the team that got to Worlds. Most people had it as a lock that SKT is going to be the team to get there for the 3rd spot, depending on who loses that tiebreak, and we assume it will be SKT, okay? In a world where SKTK is the 3rd team for Korea, come on, Froskurinn. SKT don't just stomp all over EDG and give them no chance whatsoever. With fucking Bengi playing the way he's playing now and half the team's slumping, like, really? They just kill them just because they're Koreans, do they? They show up to the game, they show their passports, and EDG say, sorry, we give up. We can't play the game.
I think what's really interesting about the top teams in China is it's not a very clear cut of, this is the best team, this is the second best team. It's very much a rock, paper, scissors and how these elements fit together. Okay. And I think that still exists, and we'll definitely get to see that play out in qualifiers. And I think again, I'm much more optimistic about what may happen against the Korean counterparts when, the Chinese match up with it.
So what's the rock from China that can beat the scissors of Korea? Which is the scissors and what rock do you want to put against it?
But I think what's really important to identify there is I feel like if we're talking about blue, white, arrows, and SK, yep. Which Candy Panda's like, what? But I call them SK for whatever reason. I think that they also have very different styles. And that certain Chinese teams like OMG might do well against blue, but won't do well against, white. I think white has, Monty, correct me if I'm wrong. Of course, I don't have your history with the teams. If I were to identify the strengths of the top Korean teams, I would say white definitely has amazing objective control. I feel like they're very methodical in their play. Blue, it's their team fighting ability. They're almost like EDG-esque in that sense, although they have better objective control and pressure early. Arrows, it's that hyper-aggression early game, high risk, high reward. And then SK, it's Faker.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that they get vision early for Faker, which helps him be Faker. And the thing about White, though, is that I feel in almost all circumstances, White has the best chance to do well against foreign teams in general, just because they may not be as good at team fighting as Blue, and they may not be as good at early aggression as the Arrows, they're probably the most well-rounded Korean team, which is very interesting. Yeah, sometimes they get big leads and do make some stupid decisions that lose them the game, but I think overall White is, it's funny to say this, I think White is the most dangerous team at Worlds, and like if they go, and I think that as long as White avoids Blue, and that's the funny thing, is that we don't really even know how good Samsung White is, because for the last 2 seasons, they've been in these team kill matches where you have them in an awkward situation against their, their sister team. And those matches are always strange. They were, team kills were strange in StarCraft. They're strange in League of Legends because you just know each other so well in practice all the time.
It's a completely different game.
Yeah, what happens if Blue hits somebody else and gets knocked out and White is still there? For all we know, White is the best team in the world that isn't, except against Samsung Blue, except in this one matchup, right?
Well,
and that's
way,
really
Monty,
fascinating to me.
In the past seasons, that was always a moot point, okay, because Samsung Blue was the best team. They won every time. But let me put it this way. If the other semi-final had been Blue against KT Arrows and KT Arrows did what they did on the weekend, then White would beat KT Arrows in the final and win no gen, right?
I would assume so, yes.
That's a pretty big distinction to make because people are going to assume that means Arrows were the best and, that it all follows by the results.
Because the Arrows are so good at maximizing Samsung Blue's early game weakness, right? It's like they were ahead in most of those games very early. And Samsung Blue, yes, is very good at recovering from early gold deficits, partially because of the team compositions they select and partially because of their team fighting ability and their decisions about when and how to team fight. But I think that the Arrows just perfectly nailed Samsung Blue right in their most vulnerable spot, and that's why they won. Personally, even though we do have this, it was an upset this last weekend, I don't think that the Arrows are the best team in the world right now. I still think Blue and White, if you put them against almost anybody else, would be better. And like I said, I think that the only team capable of stopping White at Worlds is Blue itself. So if somebody can take out Blue, I mean, there could be a theoretical situation like this at Worlds, right? I don't know. I think the Arrows can beat SKTK. Just because I don't think Faker is enough, and I think Rookie is like a top 3 mid laner and can hold his own. But I think that if the Arrows go to World alongside Blue and White, if the brackets work in a way where White is on one side and Blue and the Arrows are on the other, I do think the Arrows can beat Blue again. And then we could end up with like a White Arrows final, in which case I would say Samsung White can win that. But it's about like the matchups and the teams themselves.
So let's just take the team, what I've heard so far, and put it together in a different sense. If the way to beat these teams, so for example, let's take Blue, the best Korean team, is you have to exploit their early game with aggression like KTA did, then why can't OMG do that?
See, and that's what the point that I was going to present is seeing the KT Arrows against Blue, I do think that there is a chance, not maybe take them out, because I think Blue still is very far ahead. And, Korea, they adapt so well. I am of the firm belief that if a Chinese team is going to take a game off the Koreans, it has to be in game 1. It almost has to be like a sucker punch because they're going to learn too quickly. And I don't think that the Chinese teams will be able to adapt just because they don't have as much versatility to pull from. It's like they can pull out maybe 1 or 2 play styles, but the Koreans can just, continuously take it to that next level and run them around. But I think that if a Chinese team is going to take a game off of a Korean team, I would say Blue and Arrows possibly. Depends very much which Chinese team faces up against Arrows. I think it would have to be one that's almost as aggressive and as crazy and maybe just catch Arrows overextending and beating themselves. I don't think a Chinese team will ever be able to touch anything that Whites does. They're too methodical, and that's too punishing on Chinese teams.
Monty, what do you think? OMG beats Blue.
Or put Starhorn. I would say OMG or Starhorn.
Okay, these two teams that are willing to go ham, then maybe they're not as good as KT Arrows, but they're going to do that style. This is a viable chance. And I get the sense you don't think so, Monty. You think they're still going to get crushed by Blue, right?
Well, I just want to say, like, Deft Heart versus Uzi 0. Like, the difference of aggression there.
Yeah,
because I don't think Arrow is a better... This is true. But, what? We got Cola and thinking of Blue top laner. I'll get it. Acorn. Acorn's much better.
Yeah, I think that Blue can just lane swap in that situation and be okay, because Deft is very good at team fighting on AD carries, even if he is a little bit weaker in lane. I do think it's possible, but I also feel that Blue is capable of coming back from 8K gold deficits, except against like the Arrows, who are a top 4 team. I mean, they fell pretty far behind against the Jin Air Stealths in a lot of the games in the quarterfinals, and were able to make it back. And I think that they could probably do the same thing again. Is there a chance? Sure, maybe. But I just don't think I would give it like a 30% maybe.
But See, that's enough for me. I'm just trying to like create these. I'm just thinking about like if the Koreans had such a bad day, and OMG, like when they're on, they're on, and a lot of people are just completely like, there's no way that anyone will ever take games off. And I don't think that's true for the north of like the western regions, but I do think that there is a chance that the stars can align and the Chinese can just come out with a sucker punch.
I've got a one-off for you already, Froskurinn, and this is one I'm surprised you didn't mention it yourself. Okay. So let's think of it. The reason why it seemed impossible to beat Korea actually was because SKT was going to be the third team, right? So those three teams are so well-rounded and they have such experience and they have amazing mid laners. And so as a result, you think, okay, there are too many people in too many positions, too much strategical depth. But remember, you guys are saying KT Arrows are going to make it. Now, if there's one thing I know about KT Arrows, it's that KT Arrows themselves, the way they fuck up other people's games by being super aggressive is how they fuck up their own games. And so that's why KT Arrows almost lost against fucking two teams before they got to play against Blue. So if KT Arrows plays against OMG, what happens then?
Arrows versus OMG. I'm trying to think about that. You got Cool versus...
I want to see that game. That game
Cool
would be a great series, right?
It would be a great series.
It would be. What, you're Cool versus Rookie, going versus... totally forgetting and spacing his name now. What Arrows? Arrow.
Someday, the wonderful
Hanachi.
Someday.
Yeah, there we go. Someday. Kakao, though. Ooh. Like, Alan Loveland would have to play, like, his top-tier game to beat Kakao.
There's no jungler in the world that creates more early game pressure than Kakao. That guy is a fucking god.
What
it's insane.
Is in watching it, like if you I think it was actually game 4 too, when Kakao is playing Nocturne and he catches Zillion coming to ward on that by the Baron, and that pretty much like ended the game. Like that is the quintessential difference to me between Korea and pretty much every other region as far as like their understanding about vision, like their understanding about vision timings and like creating those windows. That was
one of the best. That was probably the best single play of that entire series.
It won the game.
Because he was so smart in how he dealt with it, because he knew that he had to blow the Zillion ult because they couldn't teamfight and get into the back line because of the two Zhonyas, the Kayle ult and the Zillion ult means that he would have died. So he had to create a pick. And what he did was he found Zillion, he waited in that brush forever, waited for Zillion to walk by, walked up, made Zillion blow his ult on himself, killed him, and then ulted back into the resulting teamfight. Like that shit is insane. I've never seen anything like that before.
And literally, you have the OGN finals where you have a play like that goes down, and then you have, just previously before that, or close to the same time, you have SK versus Alliance. And I don't know if Monty, you need to go watch this play. This is kind of like, I've always thought like the Western teams are so underdeveloped in their understanding of vision, and people will argue with me all the time, but literally game 2, Alliance versus SK, at the YouTube video, if you literally go to 19 minutes and 50 seconds, you will see Shook walk over to the dragon. He'll place a pink ward and he'll start clearing the dragon ward. He hits it twice. Before he clears the vision on it, he actually Qs. He's playing Elise. He draws aggro of the dragon, and of course his team is kind of collapsing to him and going to join this dragon. His team makeup is Xerath, Morgana, Elise, Corki, and they have the river brush warded. So before he clears vision, he aggroes the dragon. If that was a Korean team, they would have cleared vision. They would have stood and hid in the dragon pit because they had a vision, or they had a river ward. And as like literally SK Candy Panda walks right up in the river, how easy is that to dark binding, to Xerath stun, to cocoon, pick up a kill right there, and then immediately take the dragon, snowball instantaneously. But freaking Alliance, and they know, like they're making that call, like we can force this, we can fight this. Spoiler alert, they don't get the dragon. They lose their pink ward. They're literally just pushed off of it. But Western teams will still argue that they have some validity or have some chance against Eastern teams. They don't even see that simple mistake. Like just aggroing the dragon and taking away the versatility of a play that could have been made there.
Right.
That makes sense.
You coach a Western team, so what do you think?
I think that Western teams do not have a chance against Asian teams.
Thank you.
Okay, so before, Froskurinn, when she gave a lot of her answers, would try and explain how the Chinese perspective on it was to set up the context, right? How would Monty fill in the perspective of Western players as to why they wouldn't see the gap there, that they're missing like a play they can make, or a way to think about the game beyond the obvious thing, which is, right, we're just going to contest the dragon as two teams now, you know?
Because it's baby steps and moving forward. And the thing about it is that once you have to be very assertive in the shot calling, and that means that everybody has to be on the same page, which means that you have to set up a system of comms that allows for that to happen in the first place. And unless all of the players have the knowledge of what can be done in a certain situation, you're not going to get there. And that's why the VOD review is extremely important. But we're still taking baby steps in order to get the teams up to that level, because in that scenario, sure, you have vision, but you have to have... Okay, so in the scenario just set up, I have not seen these games yet because I was not available. I was in Busan all weekend, not here in Seoul, and not able to watch the EU LCS. But let me just put it in a different way. So in that hypothetical scenario where you put down the pink ward, you have this vision, and you decide not to make a play. Well, the decision about whether to make a play or not has to come from previous comms about where people are on the map, what vision and wards they have, whose flashes are up, whose ultimates are up. All of these factors come into play in that decision. So the biggest problem that I see with Western teams is that they are not assiduous enough when it comes to taking timers and then constantly talking and making sure that not only they're talking, but that everybody is listening and everybody is absolutely 100% on the same page. Because then and only then can you know the percentage chance that that play is likely to work, right? So then you can say, okay, we throw out the dark binding here, or you make the decision, okay, they're all here. They could be all here. They have too many cooldowns up. We don't have X ult or this flash or this teleport, and our top laner's up in top. So we actually can't make this play right now. And that kind of decision making is why the Korean teams are so good. It's because they have more information to make the better decision. So the main issue that I see with Western teams at the moment is that they do not have the information to even make an informed decision about what's going on. And because they're not used to practicing with sufficient information or consistent information, they never know then, will this play work? Because if you're in that situation and you know, if this person's flash is down and my flash is up and this ult is down, then we can make this play. But you can't actually gain that information until your comms are good enough to isolate the cause of that decision. Because you'll never know if nobody knew what to do or what was up, then you can't even know possibly what the right decision was, right? So that's the problem that I see. And like that's what I've been working on with CLG like a lot for the past couple of weeks, is really writing them hard about this, because it's not their fault. They're not stupid. They're just not getting the information they need to make the right calls.
Do you think, Froskurinn, that the Chinese teams are closer to the NA and the EU teams in this sense, or are they partway between the two regions? Where do you see them in this particular capacity?
As far as the vision control, I think that the Chinese are very one-dimensional like the Western teams. I think the biggest difference between the Chinese teams and the Western teams, I talk about mechanics a lot, and I want to kind of clarify definitions. I believe that the Chinese teams have some of the best mechanics in the world, alongside the Korean players, and I think that's a big issue with the North American and European players. But effectively, I mean, this game isn't that complex. If you really break it down, your 4 buttons. I think that your mechanics are limited by your strategical thought process. Like if you think back to Faker, you know, if you ask, you know, why is Faker so good? They show them the mechanical video of like a ZL player or something. But what makes Faker amazing is like his intelligence and how his his mechanics are able to support his intelligence to make those strategical and crazy plays. So then you go back and you say, well, the Chinese teams don't have the same strategy, but it's a different type of strategy. It's a micro strategy about using cooldowns and how to stack ultimates and where to position in team fights that I think is far superior for the Chinese teams than the North American and European teams. And so as far as the vision is concerned, I think China's pretty much in the same boat as the Western world. It's kind of like we put wards there, just throw 50 wards on the map. Hopefully we'll hit something, something will light up, someone will walk through it. There's been some creative, but it's pretty much on the same, you know, level as NA and EU as they try to figure that out. But as far as the micro strategy of team fights and understanding your composition and understanding why you have a champion, where to play, how to utilize a cooldown, I think China is miles ahead of North America and Europe.
I agree with that.
Okay, so before we go off this topic then, let's talk about that exact topic there, about like team fight understanding. What is different then about the Chinese approach to it that's better than the West, than the Korean approach? Because if you've ever watched those videos, I love watching them, where OGN make, where they take a team fight
like circle.
and they do the subs. It's a really cool way to do it, right?
Really cool.
Because what you realize when you watch that is like, oh, the level of thought that goes into this. First of all, there's clearly a level that they're getting drilled to understand what their role is at each time. But then also each player is intelligently making an analysis himself of what he can do in that position. Whereas in a lot of the team fights in the West, it's either just people like trying to do a physical outplay of someone, or maybe someone just has like a moment of brilliance and they do something cool. You couldn't really break it down to the same degree, I don't feel like. So where does China fit within this?
As far
one
as
sense, though.
Are you talking about China as compared to the Koreans for the mechanics?
Oh, I'm talking about in the team fights. Like,
And
is it a similar story when you watch these Chinese team fights? You're thinking the same as me when I watched this video. Like, wow, I could see what he was doing there, and he knew exactly the range that his ability had compared to his teammate who was going to help him in this way, and that's why they picked these champs at the beginning. Like, I didn't realize it before, but they've understood this synergy is going to work for them. Is this really what you're seeing?
How Chinese think about, for the most part, there's been a couple of just complete blunders, but for the most part, I think how the Chinese teams think about compositions and how they think about team fighting is incredibly unique and really proficient. I honestly believe that, again, if we go back to my definition of like strategy increases mechanics, I think if you eliminate the knowledge game, like if it's just for whatever reason the map is completely, you can see everything. Everything's lit up, and it's just a Korean team and it's a Chinese team, and they just crash into each other. I think mechanically and how they team fight, it would be very close. But where I think the Koreans beat the Chinese is because, again, it's about the fact that they have more knowledge and they create more windows, and that's how they beat them in the team fights. But I feel like the Chinese, they're just as good as counter-engage, flanking, although they're not very good at poke compositions. So that's kind of the one drawback. But Chinese
they're
teams...
not very good at split pushing either.
No, split pushing, yeah. But again, like if it's just like a 5v5 team fight and just mechanics and players going in and using cooldowns at the perfect time and stacking ultimates the correct way, making sure that you pop that guy's Banshee Veil right before the Cataclysm comes down on him, I think the Chinese and Korean teams are so far ahead.
And I think that the difference there between what I was talking about in terms of making an objective play in a team fight is, yes, you still have to know whose flashes and ults are up, but the thing about team fighting is that it requires less advanced planning, right? If you're in the heat of things, you can get a couple summoner timers, a couple ult timers, you're going to be okay. And then as people use abilities over the course of the team fight, it's just having intelligent target calling in the team fight itself. So it's much more like immediate, right? Or this guy has no mana, don't focus him, like blah, 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 blah. The thing about objective control like Dragon and Baron and, getting the clean rotations in is that you have to be planning ahead like two minutes at least in advance in order to get that. So you have to have this information and then be discussing it beforehand. It's not a reactive play a lot of the time like a good team fight is. And so I think that in general in League of Legends, the progression that we see teams go through is kind of like shit solo queue play into good team fighting play, because that's where you start getting some of the timers in there, and then you have the immediate reaction, and then only after that do we move into the actual like solid objective based play. Obviously it doesn't always follow this progression, but if we even look at the overall like cycle of League of Legends esports, started out as shit solo queue, kind of like season 2 moved into like 99% like team fighting ability, and then from season 3 onward we started actually getting into some like complex lane swaps and actually like bigger picture and more deep strategic play. And I think that this is a result of like taking the team fight comms and then moving them into like an earlier timeline. So perhaps like some of these Chinese teams will start to realize that they can do this kind of in a slightly different fashion in order to more efficiently take objectives.
I think Starhorn is the first team that's suddenly occurring to.
Okay, Monty, so let me rewind it a bit and give you another Chinese versus Korea matchup. Again, you gave me the most extreme example. You put EDG against KT Arrows, and KT Arrows, okay, they're going to dominate them early. They're going to get it so that you can never get to where NaMei can really dominate the game, okay? But if you put EDG against Blue, now EDG against White can win at any point in the game. If you put EDG against Blue, aren't there going to be a bunch of games in this series where it would go late game, and now NaMei has a chance?
Yeah, I think that would actually be a really, really fun series to watch. It would be boring as fuck for like the first 20 minutes, but then it would be hilarious. But I do think that Blue has the difference between Blue and EDG is I think that Blue has fundamentally better late game objective control around Baron. I mean, you saw, yes, the KT Arrows messed up their Baron control a little bit, but Blue stalled out Baron for a shockingly long time in some of those games. And I think that would be like the real nail in the coffin. And the other thing is that Blue is very good at playing poke compositions. So it's hard to deal with them around these objectives sometimes because there's not a way to prevent them from repeatedly poking you out and sweeping your vision. So
When you were
go on Froskurinn.
when you were talking about in the cast, the KT Arrows, their initial, I think it was game 1, trying to control the Baron, and just they knew they needed to be over there. That was like, I was looking at them as like, KT Arrows is the long lost Chinese team of Korea. Like, that is literally what the Chinese, they'd be like, I think we're supposed to be over here, but I just can't get this to work.
It was killing me that they kept like recalling one by one and buying no wards. I was like, what is happening?
I'm just refreshing my mana bar.
So Monty, whenever we describe what our ideal style, because we actually have a similar philosophy on games where we like a very tactical approach and kind of, we don't want to just like, okay, I'll put it like this. You don't ever want to get into a scenario where it is really chaotic and it's a back and forth just slugfest, because then the other guy can knock you out. No matter who you are in that sort of a scenario, to get that opening to knock him out, you have to give yourself a chance to get knocked out, essentially. Okay. Instead, we like a kind of tactical, just pick them apart a little bit. So we're giving up very little, but we're getting decent reward back for it. And over time, you just can't beat that approach. Okay. It wears you down. That's all great, Monty, if Blue is the best team. It's all great when SKTK was the best team, because these teams typify exactly that style and they're so controlling. But how can Monty love KT Arrows so much, who are the fucking Chinese go ham or lose completely style of play? Just explain it to me, Monty. I want you to just give me the realization of what's going on here.
I will admit that it's partially my longtime KT fanboying. Certainly the Bullets were the kind of team, the Bullets are really the epitome of that kind of team. Like, if we look historically, the Bullets are the ones who would wear you down with like smart decisions. Like, because the thing about SKTK is they would still have a lot of explosive playmaking potential with Piglet and Faker. But let's be real, the Bullets never had any kind of explosive playmaking potential. Like, they had some early game control from Kakao, and Kakao was great at managing their early game, but they were the ones who were going to like sneak the objectives. They were the ones who were going to just wear you down bit by bit. They were the ones who were going to come back, not through a team fight, but through like tooling you around the map. And so part of it is that my love for the KT Bullets has like bled over into the Arrows, and my love for Kakao as a jungler has bled over into the KT Arrows. But I find the KT Arrows very fun to watch and very interesting to discuss. And the reason why I like KT Arrows games so much is that they go so hard and their aggression is so like kind of stupid at times that there's massive ability for other teams to counterplay against them. And for me, it's fascinating to see how teams react to being like all in by the KT Arrows, to see if they have like the balls to take the objectives that they can get in return. So it's fun to watch their games for me for that reason.
So Monty, let me ask you this way then. If KT Arrows beats SKTK and they go to Worlds, then haven't KT Arrows just shown the rest of the world, including China, what to do against Blue and SKT?
Well, sure.
Doesn't that in any way give other people a chance? Then that's like out of nowhere, just before Worlds, a team comes along, beats these other teams, except White. We'll put White out of the equation because I don't know how you.
Okay,
only Blue know that. Okay,
here's the difference. Yeah, you could say, oh yeah, they just showed them how to do it. Well, I'm sorry, you're probably still not as good as maybe the best jungler in the world.
Oh,
like that's the thing is like Kakao. If you just watch his games, he is so good at predicting the other junglers' movements and really getting in their head and being there before they are, knowing exactly where they're going to be ganking and counter ganking, and it's really, really difficult to like deal with him. And like that's the secret sauce that the KT Arrows have, right? That
I think I have to counter for that. He's called Dandy.
It's true. I agree with you.
Isn't he the counter? If that's the
right,
one
but
real,
that's the one. That's why I think that White would beat Arrows in a best of 5.
What do you think on any of this, Froskurinn? Do you want to jump in?
I just want to extend because I was really impressed. Or like, I'm not obviously an OG and expert, but I was really impressed with Kakao. Monty said, obviously understanding exactly where the enemy jungler is and always being there, but it's not even the jungler that impresses me. It's like he knows where everyone's going to be. If you think back to, I forget one of the games that got Kassadin, and he actually, you know, predicting that Kassadin was going to rift walk right on top of him to kill him, and he flashed over the wall, or predicting that Zilean was going to come in to ward there, so he knew that he could find like a pickup. It's like not just as one-dimensional as knowing where his enemy jungler is. So that, to me, you know, speaks volumes that it's not just he knows his role so well and he knows what other junglers and, you know, studying what other junglers are going to do, but he knows exactly where everything is going to happen in the team fight, in the stage of the game, as far as, you know, where a team is going to be. I found that really impressive from Kakao.
Okay, so we've talked around the OGN finals without going in depth, so let's do that next. But I actually want to get a drink of water now, so if you want to take like a 5-minute break, let's do it now. And then we'll go into the rest. Okay, so now we'll talk for real this time, not just people leading into shit. So then Thorin's like, fuck, how do I put these timestamps later? This doesn't make any sense. We'll actually talk for real about OGN finals now. Now, going into
for real.
Yeah. But going into it, we have to get Froskurinn in on this first, because we have to implicate her in our crime, Monty, of underestimating the KT Arrows. Froskurinn, you didn't in a million years think KT Arrows was going to win this final.
I didn't really have enough experience with KT Arrows to say decisively one way or the other. I kept tabs on Blue and White because I heard that they were the top Korean teams, but I really hadn't watched a lot of Arrows beforehand. I saw them in the finals, and then I was like, oh shit, I'm going to be on Summoning Insight, so I started going back and re-watching them. But that was one of the first times that I've ever really seen them go at it.
What do you mean you didn't know either way? In that case, you didn't think they were going to win because you had no reason to compel you to think they'd win, right?
I thought the Blue was going to win. I took the high road, because everyone keeps telling me, you know, Blue is the best team in the world. You should see them play. And personally, I think White is the best team in the world. I think Blue has a definite weakness.
I agree, actually. I just think that Blue has hit White, or like White has hit Blue too many times, and like that's just
when they play each other, the pick spans is entirely different.
Monty, that's not fair though, because here's the thing. It'd be one thing if White really was the best team in the world, but they kept playing and then that's how it happened. But that logically doesn't add up, Monty. That still makes Blue the best team in the world. You know why? Because Blue always have to play against White, because no one can beat Blue either. So that doesn't entirely work there, Monty. Like, okay, I know what you mean.
But now we actually
world champions. Okay.
Now we actually have evidence that people can beat Blue, though. Oh, that's the difference.
Now it's true, Monty. Now it's finally true. But before, if you just
I don't know if it's true, but it's possible. Yeah. But I didn't say that before. I did not say that before, did I? No, I did not.
I don't know about that. I still thought White was to win Worlds. Anyway, so when we went into this final, Monty, you said like Arrows can win a game, and you know maybe it'll be 3-1 instead of 3-0. Still, on paper, this was one of the biggest favorites for anyone going into an OGN final. Blue this time around, right?
Yeah, I would say that last season between Shield and Blue, it was a lot more of a toss-up, like in terms of my thoughts prior to the match. I wasn't as sure as I was in previous finals. Like let's go through the finals. I was pretty sure Sword was going to beat Frost. I was like really pretty sure about that one. I was pretty sure that Blaze was going to beat Ozone. Obviously, I was wrong there. I thought the KT Bullets would win narrowly against SK Telecom K last year.
They almost did, Monty. They almost did.
I thought that SKTK would crush Ozone. That happened. And then I thought Shield would narrowly win against Blue. So I guess I'm like 50% of my finals predictions. Oh wait, maybe I've only gotten like 2 right. Oh man, I'm bad at this.
No, but that's all. I'll tell you why, Monty. It's because analysis works best on mundane day-to-day things, because by default you're looking at things from a long perspective and you're thinking, if these teams played X amount, who would win the most and what are the reasons that go. So as a result, I've actually found historically that's what makes finals really hard to predict. Because once you get to a final is actually very different from a semi-final. There are teams who could beat other teams in a semi-final. I think that's why you saw teams like Sword and Arrows go to best of full 5-game series on their runs up to the finals. The difference is, once you get to a final, that has like a level of pressure that you can never fully know how much that'll affect certain players until they're in that moment. And then even if they won once, maybe that time things just went right for that guy, and actually you find this time's when he gets exposed. The next time he has some problem, There seems to be some distinction there, because I'll give you a very short example, because I know people don't really care about other games. But in other games, I noticed historically when I used to watch the major tournaments that were like the 1 or 2 per year that really decided the best team in the world, there were some teams who could win all the medium events leading up to them, but then they would lose in that major tournament. Meanwhile, there were certain people who they might bomb out and come 4th in one of those medium ones, and they have one where they come 2nd, and they maybe win 1 out of the 5, but they were made of super clutch material. They were just nerves of steel, and they were the ones who just make it through in the big major final. So what's funny is, in some of these majors, the team that actually won were not the best team in the world, but they were essentially the best team under the most pressure in the biggest moment, And so actually sometimes the best team in the world was the one who came 2nd in the major and won all the other tournaments, and by default that made them the best. But it meant the analysis aspect of trying to predict who would win that one match that's going to happen once, it's actually really hard, right?
Yeah, it is. And I guess I've only ever predicted two finals correctly, and arguably those were some of the easiest to predict as well. In the close finals, I've been wrong every time. So
let's just get this out on the table. Who actually thinks if that final was played 10 times in a row, that Arrows would win more than 3?
I think it was really important that it was a blind pick, that they made it all the way to the blind pick, just because Arrows as a team, like if I'm thinking and going again, relating back to LPL, pick ban phase is going to wreck them. If it's blind pick, a Chinese team will leaps and bounds over their recent performance. And the fact that they were able to grab like a hard engage like Maokai, like just again that mentality of being so aggressive and what a Maokai pick and that guaranteeing that hard engage means for a team like Arrows versus a team like Blue, I think that was really where it was decided.
Right, and we saw the difference too in the Riven game as well, with the identical composition, except with swapping out Riven for Maokai, because Maokai ended up being banned, and that really didn't work out at all for the Arrows, because they did lack that hard engage. And even though they landed what was potentially like the best Riven engage ever of like flash, like triple stun, it just wasn't enough.
So Monty, one of the things about this final, because I want to set up the context of it, that really kind of irritates me, is that when KT Arrows won, it was presented as, oh, yeah, obviously things that we've joked about already. Suddenly Samsung Blue isn't the best, and now KT Arrows are the best. Things that are obviously way too much to go off being 1 game better than someone. But that's the point. They were only 1 game better than a Samsung Blue. And it wasn't like one of those series, Monty, where I smash you 1 game, you smash me the next game, I smash you 1 game, and then finally you won the 3rd game. No, there was
all
like
of the
3
games,
4 games.
Crazy even. Except
Blue
for the last
could have won
one.
this 3-0. KT Arrows could have won this 3-0, just on the way the actual games went, right?
Yep. Absolutely. The games were insanely close up until game 5. That was the only one-sided game. Which is, I think, one of the reasons why it was so incredibly entertaining. Yeah, there were a lot of mistakes. Would I say this is the best of 5 that's ever been played? No. I still say KT Bullets SK Telecom K from last year was, just because I think we saw more strategic diversity and evolution over the course of the series from those teams, and fewer overall mistakes being made, even though some of those games were really, really one-sided in favor of like the KT Bullets or in favor of SK Telecom. And this series, game by game, was so incredibly close. But this is probably like I'm trying to think of if another best of 5 besides SKTK versus KT Bullets that I would put above this one.
Let me think. A best of 5. Does that have to be a best of 5? Can it just be a best of 3 series as well?
Okay, I guess we could do a best of 3.
I have a question for Monty, if I may. Do you think the Arrows would have won had it not the rules of the, you know, like a blind pick? Like I
If it
honestly
hadn't have been blind pick, Monty, would Arrows have still won?
I don't think they would have.
see, and I'm of the same opinion. I feel like one really unique thing though is that I feel like the Arrows almost forced Blue to play their type of game. Like it started out like standard Blue at the beginning of the series, you know, it was very much about like vision control, things like that. But by like game 4, it was literally just these elongated team fights of like
With,
a
like,
minute and a
people
half.
dying
people
and then teleporting. It's hilarious. That's what made it so incredibly entertaining, though.
But,
So
like,
I've got another question then. Monty, if by some miracle they'd gotten to blind pick when Shield had been playing against Blue, and Shield had just picked the shit that they pick every time, so they'd had LeBlanc on Gugung, and they'd had Shyvana on save, could Shield also have beaten Blue?
Yeah, I think so. And it's
Do you
worth
think this
noting.
has exposed something in Blue then? Because obviously Blue never had to get a blind pick ever against anyone before.
Right, exactly. They lack that kind of experience, and I think that while Dade can do well in terms of blind picking his champions, a lot of the other, like especially Blue's bottom lane, is dependent on having a decent matchup because their laning phase, as we've seen, is not that great.
Okay, but you told me Deft was the best AD carry in the world.
I think I said that NaMei was, but okay.
He's better than Deft?
I would say right now, given Deft's recent performance. The thing about Deft is that he's never been super strong in lane. He's been a team fighting AD carry.
Sure.
Can I make a statement about Deft and correct me if you think I'm wrong? I have this working theory that he's like the Faker of AD carries. In a sense that when Faker gets like shit canned on the rare occasion that it does, he's able to like just maximize his performance. I think Deft is kind of the same way, that even if you give him very little, especially when he's on Twitch, that he will maximize his performance.
Well, he had that crazy comeback game in the white semifinal where they killed him like 5 times early, and he was still destroying team fights at the end. And yeah,
and
I would.
people,
I think he had a.
playing
I think he had
Rise,
a. Yeah, I think he had a
Yeah.
bad series. I think he had a bad series against the KT Arrows, but like he did not perform very well. But I think that he's, except for this one series, he's been very consistent in his play, and he definitely can maximize his game. And I think that that was just a really perfect example of it because he literally died 5 times in the early game. White just tried to shut him down so hard, and 35 minutes in, he was a force to be reckoned with. So.
I think you're absolutely right. Like I think back to that game, like Dade playing Rise, and you know, talking to people, they gave Dade so much credit. And yeah, Dade's really good, but you know, he's playing Rise. It's not like he's you know, flashing like the perfect cooldown or really outplaying. He's effectively just like button smashing and just face tanking in there. And they completely ignore the fact that Deft got like the perfect spray and pray like right up through them. The fact that they got White in that choke point. You have to talk about like the fight right underneath Red, and then Dade literally stands toe to toe with I think 3 people and just eliminates them with the Rise AoE. I just don't understand. And people are like, yeah, Dade, best carry of Blue. I honestly think it's Deft.
What do you think, Monty?
I think
Who is the
just
true carry?
I want to see Deft and Mata together. That's what I want.
Did you say Mata?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, but in our dimension, who is the true carry of Blue? So here's the thing, Monty. After that final, okay, maybe Froskurinn wants to say it's Deft, but I don't know. That final and knowing the context of it that's the moment you have to perform. Deft was a bit underwhelming. Meanwhile, okay, Dade had like a game maybe where he was just okay. The guy was fucking amazing in nearly all those games.
And the fact is that his Yasuo in the last game, he was getting significantly better Yasuo ults off throughout the course of those team fights, even though he was really far behind. And his Yasuo ults made it so hard for the KT Arrows to actually close that game because they kept losing those team fights at the inhibitors. And a lot of that was because they kept trying to set up picks with Kakao and Rookie, and Dade would counter Yasuo ults after the exhausts were down to actually maximize his damage. And he's just a better Yasuo player.
I've got a point while I still have it in mind. Do you remember the first time White played Blue? It was in the spring semi-final, and I made that. Obviously, I was joking at the time about how the reason why they would lose is because Dandy knows Dade so much that he'd literally just like be like, right, I'm just gonna ruin this guy's life. Like I know where he's gonna be. I know how to shut him down. Like essentially, without knowing it, that's kind of what KTRs were able to do. They were able to actually come in and shut down the biggest, neutralize the strengths of blue. Knowing that now, do you think that would actually change if white plays blue? Like now white can actually see, because in theory, white could do something similar, right? They have the tools, they have the super mechanical players.
Possibly. It is really difficult to shut down Dade in lane because he's a very passive laner most of the time. Like he'll just sit there and farm. You rarely see Dade like picking up lane kills, and he mostly plays pretty far back. So, and he also like doesn't take summoners. He takes Ghost and Flash because he wants to team fight. He doesn't take summoners that are very good for actually like playing aggressively in lane or even being able to win a 1v1 or a 2v2 with his jungler against the other mid and jungle. So it's difficult to, he's so slippery though in lane as a result that it is pretty hard to gank him a lot of the time. And the other thing is, even if he does fall behind, the fact that he has Ghost in a team fight allows him to maximize his damage output in a way that most other mid laners can't do. So I don't know if white is going to be able to have those tools just because, like, I don't think Pawn's as aggressive as Rookie, and I think it's really about the Cacao Rookie duo, because Pawn is just, he's a pretty passive player as well, generally speaking. So I don't know if they even have the tools necessary to play that aggressively.
Froskurinn, did watching that final, since you know how heavily the hype built on Deft, deservedly so was, did watching that make you think like, okay, listen, China, you have you have everything else, but China has the best AD carry?
Yeah, I think the difference between the Korean bot lanes is on the support more so than the AD carry. I don't think that there's an AD carry in Korea. Not like super outclassed, but I definitely think, you know, NaMei, Deft, Imp, even Uzi could all kind of stand on the same thing. I think the big difference is Mata and even Heart. I think Heart is a better support than a lot of the supports in China, which is kind of an issue. But Mata, for sure, that guy is insane.
But isn't that the problem when you're saying it there? Essentially what you did there is take it from a 1v1 question to a 2v2 question, which is how the lane's going to be played. Isn't that going to be a problem then for someone like NaMei if he doesn't have, like, listen, even if NaMei is better than Imp, and he might be, Imp has Mata. So doesn't that automatically just mean the Imp and Mata supersede NaMei and whoever he's playing with?
If you're going to rank AD carries, I like to rank them in the context of their team fighting, just because I think that's, you know, that's the point of the AD carry, as opposed to like lane phase. I think I'm gonna make like a bold statement. I think I made this statement before. Now, again, I haven't watched a ton of Imp particularly. What I have seen from him, he feels very flashy. Like if I were to kind of like compare them, I would say like Deft is the NaMei and Imp is like the Uzi. It's more of kind of like that flash, I'm gonna find you, duel you, kill you. Whereas NaMei is more about, you know, like supporting his team. I think that's
it's the same way as Imp too.
Yeah. And so in context, I think like Deft, why I put Deft as the best in Korea is because of the team. And I value that. And I think, again, in China, it's about the team. Why do they group up so early? It's because all of their power is in that bot lane. They need to get that guy involved as quickly as possible. So you have these really early groupings where you have like these 5-man teams wandering around simply because they can have that guy there. And in the context of team fighting, NaMei and Deft, I think, are on the same level. It's just about the other players.
I mean, yeah, I think that's probably a pretty accurate assessment, and I think Deft could go even further, right, with a different support rather than Hart. I think Hart is kind of, I'd be surprised if he didn't retire after this season and go into coaching, because he's kind of getting on the older end of things.
When they lost, I think it was like Hart had Thresh and Mata had Alistar. And like you shouldn't, like it's a 2 range versus a melee range, and the fact that Mata and Imp were just able to like bully out Deft and Hart, effectively completely shutting them down. I was like, that guy's a god support. He effectively won that lane for Imp 2v1'd on a champion, a matchup that he shouldn't win.
You know, one of my axes to grind that I hate theoretically is whenever the team becomes the best, then everyone says everyone in their fucking role is the best. And someone who came on this show played a part in that. Do you remember the episode we had where we had Loco Doco on? And he made some sort of statement, like I think he actually said that Heart is better than Matter. Or made out like they were the top 2 supports or something like that.
Yeah,
have your feelings changed on that?
I don't think that's true.
Have your feelings changed on it at all?
I mean, I just think Mata's vastly superior.
Well, when you said that, though, if he had a different support, you didn't say just if he had Mata. Are there other supports who could also elevate depth? They could take him to the next level?
Probably. Maybe Hachani.
Can you think of one? Hachani?
I'd like to see what Mad Life could do. Because, like, the thing about Mad Life is Mad Life's been in what you would call bad
Never
teammate
a good AD
prison for
carry.
so long. Like, I don't know if he's good anymore, right?
Sure. Has Hachani shown you enough yet, though? Because Hachani feels to me like what Gorilla felt like the season they went to the final, where because of their style of play, they do make these badass, flashy plays, and you think, wow, that guy, he could potentially be one of the best supports. But then now that Shield's dropped off, I don't know if you'd throw Gorilla out there as like a really great support player, right? Okay, so I was asking a question there about what you thought of Gorilla, whether or not he actually, because I'm trying to draw the comparison here, okay? Hachani essentially has had 2 splits, really. I don't know why I keep saying splits. I've been like brainwashed out. Riot, you've won. You win, Riot. There's actually seasons, okay? So, yeah, there's seasons.
What is a
seasons.
split? Where did this word come from? Where did it come from?
Maybe it's because of the split personality of whoever comes up with the decisions at Riot. You know, I don't know. He's like, oh, I split again.
It came out of the box of words of marksman. That's where that one came from, too.
So let's put it back in that box where none of it. We all agree here to call them ADKs. Fuck marksmen, they're not. And so yeah, in the same sense, season. So really, Hachani's only had like 2 seasons, and then because they got stopped in the round of 8 in the one before, we haven't really seen that much of him as like a big level player. So that's why I'm drawing the comparison to Gorilla, because the idea there is most people probably wouldn't rate him super highly, even if he is still good, just because he only had a little flash where his team looked good. Okay, is Hachani separated from that somehow? Is he still within that? Do you think? What do you think? Are you sold on him?
I'm not 100% sold on him yet. I think he still needs some time to develop in order to see. I mean, he's only recently kind of burst onto the scene, so we'll see if he's a flash in the pan or not. But his upside is incredibly high. But he still does do dumb shit, like randomly get caught out warding, and that's something that we don't see supports like Heart and Mata doing very frequently.
So when I compared, we essentially started comparing 2v2, the Korean and Chinese bot lanes there. Even if Froskurinn will bow to the Korean throne and she'll say, okay, I think Koreans are better and they'd win overall, even though I tried to like elicit some debate about whether certain teams would beat each other. Okay, as a general trend, I'm pretty sure Froskurinn, you still have the Korean sort of elitism where you're like, okay, maybe those Korean teams could beat the Chinese teams. But 2v2, the bot lanes of China would smash all of the Western bot lanes.
Yes.
Am I wrong?
I don't think that there's any chance that a Western team has against an Eastern team. And
whoa. Wait a minute. Are you forgetting? We remember this incredible team. I've got 2 bot lanes that you already know are coming, but I'm just going to have to hit you with them, okay? So here's the first one. You do know there's this team with this incredible support. He's actually a very good player. Yellow Star, he's the support. And then Reckless. Reckless is, you know, Anakin Skywalker in that second Star Wars prequel where he's just become a teenager and you know he's going to become this badass master Sith Jedi, but he's still not quite there. He's got some of his skills, but he hasn't honed them and he needs to be taught and learn those life lessons. People think Reckless is about to become Darth Vader. He's about to become this next level. If that amazing Yellow Star Reckless bot lane went up against the Uzi Zero, against the NaMei fzzf, Z, that's the letter Froskurinn, that's the language.
Z.
I'm just going to tell you.
WTF 2 Zs?
If he went up against those 2 bot lanes, how would that lovely Fnatic bot lane that I'm sure you love do?
Okay, can I take a soapbox for a second here? Because I cannot, there's like an animosity between me and the EU fans. It's weird because like the other region that I probably watch the most of is EU, just again because of time. I take all the tickers, by the way, for Gosu Gamer. So I, in fact, at least have to be present for every single match, and I take the picks and bans for every single region except for Korea. But historically, and I went through, from Season 2 onwards, a Western team has never beaten a Chinese team in a best of series. since Season 2 onwards, a Western team has only won 3 games against a Chinese team. IM, 2 games, All-Stars, 2 games. Who were those teams? Gambit, Fnatic, and Cloud9. What were the teams that they beat? Invictus
this is after
Gaming.
Season 2, yeah?
Yeah,
After.
this is after Season 2.
Okay.
That's as far back as my stats went in checking the match history.
So what was the first event this came from?
I think the
Off the
first
top of your
event
head?
that I had stats on where it was just after Season 2 championships.
Wait a minute, didn't
CLG
didn't CLGU win a game off World Elite?
World Elite. But after that, there's been
Okay.
no.
Right, since then though.
Since then, that was the only best of series. Since then, they've never won a best of series against them. They've only taken 3 games off of them. Gambit, Fnatic, Cloud9. So again, Cloud9, the top North American team. Fnatic at the time was ranked 2nd at IEM. Gambit was ranked 5th, I believe, at the time. But IEM is supposed to be Gambit's. For whatever reason, they just get like a power up. They were against IG, which was ranked 6th at the time, and they were against World Elite, that was ranked 4th and 5th at the time. I think they were tied in a flex position. And people, like, literally this, I keep having this conversation, like, people will bow down and they'll be like, yes, the Koreans are the best, but the Chinese, fuck those guys. They don't know anything. The European teams are going to beat them, and there's literally zero historic content or statistics that promote this idea. Like at IEM, you A, had a patch problem, but B, okay, your best teams happen to beat the shitter teams from China at the time. Like, congratulations. Do you want an award for that? Like, and then we'll take OMG versus Cloud9, because I think that's a legitimate thing, because it was the top 2 teams. The big issue is after Cloud9 beats OMG goes and they make a public statement. They say, we're sorry to our fans. We overlooked Cloud9. This will not happen again. What's scarier? An upset or random upset, or a team that says this will not happen again, they immediately 2-0 Cloud9. It does not happen again.
Well, the first game of that series was close. The second game was a stomp, but.
And the other weird thing about it is if you look at it, again, going back to IEM, this was, again, around the time that Morgana spiked up. The 3 games that Western teams have taken off Chinese teams all have had a Morgana on them. Gambit played Morgana, Fnatic played Morgana, and Cloud9 played for Morgana. When OMG then went and 2-0'd Morgana, or 2-0'd Cloud9, they banned Morgana back-to-back. So if there's a tip to take out of this whole spiel, it's Western teams need to stop talking without context. Like, they don't watch LPL. They're talking without any sort of statistical or proof that these Chinese teams aren't valid and aren't a threat. And B, pick Morgana. Play it against the Chinese teams.
Well, I don't know if that's going to keep working, but I feel like just due to the kind of isolation of the meta in China, there's always like 1 or 2 weird lane bully picks that the Chinese aren't going to actually pick up in time. And so it becomes a pretty easy pocket ban phase for the Chinese teams, like you're talking about. Maybe it won't be Morgana specifically this time, but there's probably going to be something else.
Disengage. I think what Morgana was really good is disengaging from the Chinese teams, and again, because they're about diving that backline and killing the AD carry and the protection she offers to them. And I think when Cloud9 beat OMG, they actually did something really smart that I don't think they realized, is that they played Evelynn and they played Twitch. They played 2 stealth champions against, frankly, a region that doesn't know how to find a ward. And it's this, NA is better than China. China's not going to beat the Western teams. I have to clear that air. I have to get off that soapbox and be like, you guys know the Western teams, people are saying, we hope NA doesn't, gets placed in the Worlds bracket as long as they're not in the team with the first place Korean team, they're going to be okay. Not realizing that the 2nd place, the 3rd place of both the Korean and the Chinese teams, I think are still going to be devastating to the Western teams. But again, that's my high and mighty horse, and I'm very opinionated on that.
No, I agree with you.
Okay, but to actually narrow to the question again, if the Fnatic bot lane went against either of those top 2
They'd get
Chinese
wrecked.
bot lanes, just in every sense?
I don't think... People say that Reckles is really good. Again, it's so stagnant. You have to look at where he's playing, the context of the teams that he's facing, and looking at that skill level. I think if you put Reckles against a Chinese team, even in the 2v2, I don't think, probably against OMG's bot lane, but again, we've talked about how they're one of the weaker bot lanes. Someone like Uzi and Zero, I don't think there's a chance for them. Someone like NaMei and fzzf, I don't think there's a chance for them. In the team fighting against Chinese teams, they're going to get blown up. Gogoing's going to rip through Reckles. Gogoing's going to rip through the front line of that team. So, I mean, that's how...
Are you as sold on this notion, Monty?
Well, just from watching our scrims here, and another duo lane that I would say is very strong in the laning phase is Doublelift and Afromu.
I would agree with that.
From watching the scrims that we've had here, when we've been against what I would consider top tier Korean duo lanes, they have pretty much gone even. And I would think that the Chinese duo lanes would do better. So if we're going to switch the conversation from Yellowstar and Reckless to Doublelift and Afromu, which I assume was coming, sure, then I would say that the Chinese would still have an advantage. The best Chinese duo lanes.
I mean, this was the other bot lane. It's the same exact scenario. Oh, they've got the wonderful support. They've got the amazing AD carry. How is it the same exact story for you, Froskurinn? If we take the CLG bot lane?
And of course, I'm a CLG fan, so this is going to be biased. But just from like a bullet point and giving information of why I think CLG would actually do better than Reckless and Yellowstar, I think it comes down to the champion pool. Okay. Just because Yellowstar is a big Leona player. And I feel like Afromu is more, I think his Alistar is really good, and I really like his Morgana. And again, you think about, I was looking at all the NA supports, and I was like, who would actually do the best against these Chinese teams? And I looked at, the Morgana players. I actually think Lemon Nation, I don't even think he's like that great of a support, but because his champion pool is Thresh and Morgana, Afromu, Alistar, and Morgana, like they play them really well, I think that gives them an edge over the Chinese teams. Whereas Yellowstar, you're not going to out-Leona a Chinese support. That's not going to happen.
Well, I mean, there's also the factor that the reason a Cloud9 bot lane would have a chance is that they essentially are doing like the same shit OMG is. They have to play against really good bot lanes and find a way to make it work. They're not going to try and just outright beat them in 2v2, right?
I think Sneaky has evolved, especially if we're going to talk about Cloud9's bot lane. I feel like Elimination might be past his prime. But I almost think like Sneaky is so strong because he's had to lane with Elimination. Like his Kog'Maw play specifically has really impressed me.
Are you telling me we found another set of training weights?
Levitation.
How would Cloud9's bot lane? I talk about, I think his Thresh has like an 87% win rate on it, and his Morgana has like a 70% win rate on it, which is something ridiculous. And Morgana is just so potent. So I just think that support players, I don't think it ever comes down to the AD carry player. Like as far as Doublelift Sneaky, they're smart enough that they're just going to survive lane. Like I feel like Doublelift can make the call like, hey, I can't win this 1v1 if I just like stay away from them.
Monty, I feel like I have to jump in here. This is exactly why I actually think Yellowstar Reckless would do better. Like, listen, you might be right about the champion pick there. I'm not sure about that. I think just performance-wise, the Fnatic bot lane would do better than the CLG bot lane. Because first of all, I think you're way off base there. Doublelift would not say, "I'm probably going to lose lane here."
No, actually, he does say that. He does say that.
Monty, he says that against Korean players. I don't know if he'll do that against his Chinese brethren.
WeiXiao though.
He doesn't. He just dumpstered him in an interview not that long ago about how he fucking fell off.
Okay, well, what he says before game, what he says in game. My opinion of what he says in game is that he gives an accurate reflection about how the lane is going and what needs to happen. He is good at doing it.
Here's my other factor. When we go to the supports, Yellowstar has a lot of experience, not only when he was there, but yeah, just tons of international experience, even from before when he was an AD carry. And in general, I don't think we've ever seen Yellowstar choke at all. Whereas, okay, I think last season, Afromu got to the level where that's not really as much of a concern now, but we've also never seen him at a world championship level stage. So that would be the other X factor for me there. I can't be certain that how they match up there. But come on, man. Okay, cut the bullshit. You've been watching fucking CLG bot lane go against LMQ bot lane all season, and you're like, I think they'd have a chance against it. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? LMQ isn't even good.
This is so true. Vasili's good. I think Moore is entirely overrated, and NoName is not good at all.
Okay. So did you just see them play them 4 times?
Okay, then again, I'm trying to emphasize more on the support. I just think Afromu is possibly the best support in North America right now. I mean, that's a statement, and I'm just assuming that Afromu could control Doublelift not to feed, and that he could be the difference in that lane, just staying away from them. But Yellowstar, again, the mentality, if he's going to play like his Leona pickup, which is what I know Yellowstar as, I don't think that that's going to go well for them at all.
What confuses me is why you keep emphasizing that though, because of the two AD carries, Doublelift is the one with the penchant for just going ham when
For
it's
just
not
flashing
applicable.
in.
Meanwhile, Reckless is the one who gets criticized for not ever doing that and playing safe as possible, right?
Well, if he plays safe as possible, especially against Uzi and Zero, he's just gonna get smashed. There won't be any place for him to come back. Doublelift again, okay, say Doublelift flashes in, then yeah, he'll feed away any lane advantage that Afro Move's champion pool will give him.
Okay. Does that apply beyond the bot lane? Do you see like, are the best Western players at the other positions, top, jungle, mid, are they all going to match up, or will they have advantages, disadvantages? How do you see the matchups going across there? I get the sense you think that the mid laners in China are underrated.
Oh, yes, they are. Okay, I like to take Alliance just because they're, the finalized team going. They're for sure going to go to Worlds. And a lot of people, I feel like, again, there's this talk that it's like Alliance is the best team coming out of the West right now. So take Froggen, for example. I feel like Froggen is almost, he's like you, is what he reminds me of. He kind of like sits in the lane, and he does really well in the lane, but as a versatile mid laner, I don't think he's really there for his team. And I think especially against the Chinese mid, like say Cool, I think Cool is just going to really expose kind of the weaknesses of Froggen. I think Froggen's experienced enough a player that if he faced Cool, I think the smartest move for him would take like a wave clear, like Orianna, Ziggs, even Anivia if he wants to go there and just keep Cool in the lane. But Wicked versus Going, that's no brainer. Wicked's about to get monstered. Reckles and Yellow Star versus, or even Tabs and Nymph versus Uzi or NaMei, they're about to get monstered. Cyanide versus Drug or Shook versus Drug. It kind of depends on the day that Drug's having, but when you factor in like the mid laner, I don't think, even on Starhorn Royal Club's level, Korn, I think is a lot better than people give him credit for.
Let's talk about this topic then. Monty, do you have a thought then on the Froggen topic there? How Froggen would do, and if you went against someone like Cool? Do you want to jump in on that before I say something?
I think it's actually more dependent on Shook's ability to keep control over the mid lane with Warden, just because Froggen is not the roamiest mid laner in the game. But as long as the other mid laner can't efficiently roam, then I think Froggen will do fine. If they somehow lose control over the mid lane, then it could end up really bad.
The thing with Froggen that I think is like a subtlety that I think people miss is that most players who play that safe style in mid are forced to play that way because they couldn't be top competitive players if they didn't play that way. They wouldn't survive if they were really aggressive. Whereas actually I think Froggen's unique in that he has the skill set that he could play like a super aggressive trade all the time, go just for kills style mid lane, but he doesn't. It's his philosophy to play that other way. And so I think he's got a little bit more wiggle room than you're giving him credit for there. Like the reason why Alliance won all those games in the playoffs was Froggen was like, he literally realizes like, okay, I have to carry all these team fights. I can never get mispositioned and die, right? What do you think, Froskurinn? Am I wrong?
Yes, he hard carried.
Oh yeah. I was just basing my opinion off of seeing Froggen over the season, because again, I have not seen yet the EU LCS players. I got back late last night from Busan. I was there for the OGN final, so I'm going to be catching up on those games.
Sure. But what is your sense for how that would work then? Like, okay, I'll put my cards on the table. I think Froskurinn is selling Froggen short a little bit. She's making it sound like he's like a defensive mid laner who he's not going to know how to handle this aggression and he's just going to get bullied around. That's been the story of Froggen's career his whole life. He's played against Moscow 5 when they were a better team than him. They had Alexic going crazy on his best champions. He's played against Xpeke a million games in a row. And when Riot even like, I don't know which person at Riot secretly loves Xpeke and was like, oh, I really want him to do well this season. Give him all those fucking assassin mid laners, rape everyone. Even then, he still found a way to be good and to compete and to never get completely bullied. Actually, here's a little secret. I'll just put this out there for everyone, okay? Everyone who's like a Froggen hater, go back to season 3 when it was all the champions he didn't want to play and find games where he got totally bullied by the best assassin players. They don't exist. I think his worst games, he might have lost by like 2 kills, and he still held his own, and they just went and killed the rest of his team because they were assassins, you know. They weren't 1v1 killing him in lane and owning him, you know. That doesn't exist.
I agree with you. I think I said that the experience that Froggen has on the international scene, like he'll be able to deal with Cool as far as like keep him in the lane. Will he be able to kill him? No, I don't think so. And I think it's very important to recognize that I'm talking about Cool. I think Cool will go down as one of the best League of Legends players in history. I think he's that
Monte,
good.
This is the phase where now we let Froskurinn explain more what she means, but we're prepared, right, to put that in the possible crazy shit compilation video that will come one day. It will come, I promise everyone. Okay, Froskurinn, now please unpack.
It's okay, though, because people will forget you, because it'll be 90% Loco Doco.
That's true.
Excellent.
Please unpack that statement.
As far as why I think Cool will be one of the best mid laners to go down.
You probably should explain that a little bit more.
Okay. Cool, when he was playing at his hype initially at Worlds, he was one of the few mid laners that could stand toe-to-toe with Faker. And even when Cool was feeding into Faker in those games, I actually felt that it was like he almost sacrificed himself. Like, I just have to keep this guy here. And Faker, outplays him with, I think it was the crazy Gragas where he like bopped him into the tower and had like the barrel waiting for him. But, he was able to stand toe-to-toe with Faker for a few of those matchups. And the versatility that he brings as a mid laner, like he doesn't play one style. Whereas again, like you talk about kind of the box that Froggen is in, like he kind of only does really one thing. He's incredible at it, but that's just kind of the one stick. Cool can play, he can be the Froggen if he needs to be. He can be the Faker if he needs to be. He can pull out the Messiah and be that Twisted Fate and hard carry his entire team. His Zanya hourglasses are on a completely different level. His champion pool is massive. And this is like, how many players have you seen professionally come back from like a retirement? It's very rare to see an ejected professional player like make their way back.
Okay, so let me ask you this to narrow it down more. Obviously, me and Monty haven't watched enough LPL to know for sure how you'd fully categorize all of his strengths and weaknesses. So let me put it like this. Are you saying that on the basis of what he's done already, he's already like in the top 10 list of all time, all players for Froskurinn? Off basis of what he's already done? Or is it like what he's going to do that's going to make him into that list? Where is he right now for you, right, in that sense,
I would already say the accomplishments that he's done definitely ranks him. I think as he continues to grow, it'll just be a matter of like where people will list him, like whether that be top 10, top 5. I honestly think when Cool loses in the LPL, it's literally because he loses 2v1. It's the jungle mid matchup versus him. Like if him and Allen are on point, him and Loveland, that is one of the most devastating things. And that's when the OMG fans, the Chinese fan inside me gets so excited, like, oh my God, if Allen and Cool are on point, that is our ticket. That is where we can, crack the Korean teams. This is it. It just, again, it's that consistency in finding that. But Cool, I feel, is very consistent across the board.
Because the thing is, I think it's very good as well. But like I say, I don't have the basis that I can say just off the Chinese play alone. So where is he ballpark? Is he already in like the top 10 ever for you? All positions?
Yeah, like I know solo queue isn't everything, especially in like, I feel like this meta currently is probably the most different than it's ever been from solo queue, like professional play versus, but he plays on the Korean server all the time. Pretty much him and Faker play against each other all the time. I know Faker really respects him, and they try different things out against each other. I know Cool's been practicing his Yasuo against Faker, and I think Faker even tried to bring out like an Anivia pick. But just like the fact that you have these really high level Korean players and they see it, but the rest of the Western world doesn't.
Well, I mean, there you go. If Faker knows that Anivia is the secret way to beat him, all I'm
Faker
saying
got
is
dumpstered in that matchup.
I was just making a joke that's why Froggen's going to win. See, because Faker knows where the true counter to Cool. No, I'm just joking there, obviously. No, but this is an interesting question because actually, if I think that way, even though I build it as that was the most ridiculous statement, it isn't. But it's just an out there statement for people who don't watch China. Okay, the reason why I asked you that though is because if you actually think of the context of the greatest players of all time, because history. 2 years ago, there was way less of it. Obviously, even in League of Legends, there was only a couple of years of pro play. So if you made a top 10 list, automatically, you'd have like Alex Ich would be in there. Well, okay, wait a minute. What's Alex Ich in there off? Well, really, it's for about a year of play, mainly in Europe and then at some international tournaments. It's not like he had like 4 years where he raped everyone in the whole world. Okay, so actually, if Cool has a good Worlds now, Froskurinn's statement probably isn't even that crazy, right, Monty?
No, not at all. And I don't know enough about Cool to definitively say or like rank him at the moment. And it's also worth saying too that if we made this top 10 list 2 years ago, I mean, we would have been in a world where the Korea and Chinese scenes were really just emerging, and so there wasn't actually enough like time for these players to get as good as or better than the North American and European players because they had their servers for such a short period of time. And even then, we saw players like Shy who took second place at Season 2 Worlds by playing for the game for only 6 months. So I mean, I think that the talent and the work ethic is better in Asia, generally speaking, and that only now can we really start to have, I think, these conversations. And it's going to be interesting, especially to have these conversations after Worlds this year, because I think that's going to be the first time that a lot of these, like, trying to talk about which players have had the biggest impact, we'll really have enough perspective to start really digging into that.
I think it'll be the first team that, or the first time that a lot of the top teams will actually make it to the world stage as well.
Yeah, well, certainly Bullets didn't make it last year, which is the greatest tragedy. Also, China only had 2 teams last year for whatever reason.
And now we have 4.
I feel like I've identified the point of contention here. I've been, my senses have been out there. I've been trying to scan. Shit, they agree about these things. Okay, I found the point of contention for Froskurinn. I've zoned in on it. You didn't say anything about it, but I think I found it. Okay, here's the weak point. The way you were so energized when you started talking about the Chinese mids, and then suddenly you went into how Cool's going to beat Froggen in this way. I think that's the point. I made the mistake of trying to make it only about AD. I thought because you love the Chinese region, you were going to big up the Chinese AD carries. They would be way better. I've realized where it is now. So Cool is going to be in the top 10 players ever at all positions. Okay, let's put that statement up there. Meanwhile, in Korea, we have all these good mids playing right now. So that must mean he's better than a good few of these guys. So we've got Dade, we've got Faker, we've got Goong, we've got Rookie, we've got Ambition. Who on this list is Cool ahead of that we just don't know because we don't watch enough LPL?
I think Cool could compete. If it was Cool, I think he could do just as well in the KT Arrows as Rookie did. Not on Yasuo, that specific champion. Don't let him play that. But I mean, I honestly think that he's up there, one of the top mid laners in the world. Again, and the versatility of everything that he can do and how intelligent. Again, it's that perfect mixture of not just mechanical ability, but the intelligence behind it and the impact on the map.
Monty, do you think Rookie is better than Cool? Just on what you know.
No.
Why not?
That's my initial impression. I think Rookie has had to face stiffer competition than Cool overall, and I think Rookie has a better understanding of how map pressure works and how to make plays on the mid lane than Cool does. And I think that in a team as focused on jungle mid synergy as the KT Arrows are, that I don't think OMG would do that well against the KT Arrows.
What do you think, Froskurinn?
If we're talking about the OMG versus the KT Arrows, no, I don't think that Kakao or that drug Cool can beat Kakao Rookie.
But just as players in isolation from each other in the game, just their skill set and what they can do.
Against Rookie, though, I definitely think that's much closer. I think Cool's 1v1 ability and the fact that he can play that utility, he can play the 1v1, he can play the assassin. If you're making it about a larger team aspect, then yeah, I have to agree with Monty. He's right there. Is stiffer competition. The mid laners are doing more in Korea than they are in LPL. But I think that if the OGN gives out that invitation to a Chinese team and they accept and it is OMG, I think that OMG would probably be the best suited because of Cool to compete against the Koreans.
Do you think Cool is better than Goong?
I haven't seen enough of him, honestly, to make that statement.
Okay.
Like I said, I've been focusing primarily on SKT1, Arrow, just recently, and then White and Blue.
So okay,
I think
Monty,
actually OMG would do the best in champions for a different reason, and that reason is, well, a couple different reasons. Less stiff competition for their duo lane, and also the fact that OMG plays the style that I would say is most similar to Korean macro strategy out of all the LPL teams. And so I think it'd be a more natural fit. And we saw that last year at Worlds too. For some reason, OMG played a more Korean style when they played against SK Telecom, but then they like reverted to ultra team fight style against Royal Club in for a reason that I still don't know, frankly, because that was their biggest mistake in that tournament. Is I feel that fundamentally they were the better team, but for some reason they just like the switch like in their brains like flipped when they had to go against Royal, and they're like, well, better team fight against this team comp that's better at early team fights than us. All in, boys. And then it was just a disaster.
Yep.
What do you think of that news then that we heard that apparently for whenever the next season of OGN is, a Chinese team, there will be a qualifier and one can go. It hasn't quite been specified yet whether they'll all play and whether it'll really be like the best one will go or whether it'll just be a Chinese team. But the prospect is really exciting, right, Monty? The idea of having a good Chinese team in OGN for next time.
Yeah, I haven't been a Chinese team since the season before I started casting, summer back in 2012 when WE was there. So it would be really exciting, obviously, for a Chinese team to come to compete. And I think that's going to be the fastest way to develop the Chinese scene because there actually isn't a hell of a lot of scrim interaction between the Korean and Chinese scenes. They're pretty isolated. My experience of talking to the Chinese teams and talking to the Korean teams while he was over here and like stuff is that mostly the Chinese teams scrim against pretty bottom tier Korean teams, but I don't think that many of the top teams scrim against the Chinese teams at all.
What do you think on this prospect of having a Chinese team go into OGN, Froskurinn?
I think we talked about it, and I think it was stated best on China Talk. We talked about Kelsey Moser stated it that the idea, and you have to think that there's no winter in LPL, and I believe that the invitation was for spring. And so effectively, by a Chinese team accepting an invitation to OGN, they're giving up their season, their chance at, you know, A, requalifying for LPL again, but B, effectively even a chance at Worlds, because that's how their invitation works. But the fact that 7 out of the 8 teams are vying for this and how important it is. And she talked about kind of the cultural aspect of the Chinese teams. They really do want to be the best, and they recognize that the Koreans are, and the importance and the value that they put on, you know, if they get that invitation to play there, to finally prove and to gain that how you do think like the narrative behind OMG, like they're the team, their tagline is we may not be the best, but we will work the hardest. And I think that mentality is actually pretty prevalent through the Chinese players.
So you actually think that even though it might mean giving up essentially their first split, fuck that word, whatever, the split of next year, that they might do it, even if it's the best team that can qualify?
I think they would all vie for it.
In that case,
not to mention that if you were confident that you would improve so much and that you could take first or second place, you may still have that shot at Worlds, right?
But Monty, you say that. That's what I was going to bring up here. If that's true, then that's actually something that China should get a lot of credit for. Because even if the NA team knew we would get better by taking a whole LCS split off and we'll get so much better, we'll definitely requalify, and then we'll probably get to Worlds. I still think most of them would bottle it and they would not do it. I think they'd think of fans and sponsors, and then they just wouldn't do it. What do you think?
That conversation has happened in CLG, but obviously is no longer a possibility for us because we have been banned from OGN and Kespa tournaments.
Oh, that's the other thing. I also forgot that in China, they just have like open tyranny in most areas. They don't have like a secret tyrant that like just capriciously punishes you if you don't. It's like sort of like a bad wife. Okay, where she,
I don't think
you have to know
fair.
what she thinks.
I can't talk about the specifics of what happened, but I can say that we did break the rules. We broke the rules knowingly, and players that have account shared and ELO boosting like Apto have faced a similar 2-year ban from competitive play. So we knew what we were doing. Now, what did we have to do that? No, but there were circumstances that were given to us that made it difficult to make a different decision.
Yeah, but that's the thing, Monty, okay? When someone steals bread because they have to, it's because they have to do it to eat. But if their friend is actually a bread maker, then he could supply them with free bread, and then there would actually be no need to steal. And so if they then get caught stealing, you should probably look at their friend, the bread maker, and go, come on, man, just help him out. What the fuck are you doing? Then if you find out that actually the bread maker is just a part-time bread maker, and the rest of the time he's a judge, and he actually ruled on that case, then come on. What's going on there, you know? Help your buddy out. We're all friends here. We're all trying to make esports bigger, right? Bread maker. Thank you.
Correct.
So cryptic right there. I'm so cryptic right now, Monty. Let's see if people can crack the code there. Okay. Right, what else is there to talk about?
The Da Vinci Code with Thorin.
Okay, Monty, I've got a question for you. I kept asking you every round of the playoffs, because you've been so hot on KT Arrows, did you really buy the idea that the team that almost lost to Shield, the team that went 5 games with SKTS, admittedly, they didn't really almost lose that one. That was just more like a SKTS won some games, okay. The team that went to 5 games with all these people, I was asking you, come on, how can you think they're going to beat Blue and like they're clearly not on the same level? Does them winning, have they eliminated that downside yet?
No.
Like, I mean, it's not even an exaggeration. Shield might have been in that final, right?
In all best of 5s, here's how the KT Arrows work. Okay, we come in, we got this strat, and then they're like, oh, we lost like one of our champions in this strat. We're going to play something random. Like, we're just going to pick like a random champion. Sometimes it's top Elise. Sometimes it's Blitzcrank support. Sometimes it's top Riven. You never know. And it's like they try to make these things worse, and then they're just like, oh, didn't work. Let's go back to playing standard. But it makes you wonder if the KT Arrows just played standard all the time. Like, would these best of 5s have been closer? I think the answer is yes, but well, I mean, it's difficult to tell. They certainly like handicap themselves in picks and bans sometimes, and that's something that I think they need to work on, because I think they get what they do. And this is, of course, the very KT Arrows thing to do. They pick Blitzcrank because they're like, well, high risk, high reward. Here we go, boys. It's like Riven, high risk, high reward. Here we go, boys. It's like good teams will never let you get away with that shit. So, and they don't get away with it. Okay. There hasn't been a KT Arrows game with like a non-meta pick that they've been like extremely successful in.
So I have a question for you in this sense. You described some games before. Okay, in the final, Blue actually played very well from behind. When they played against Stealth, they were behind and they played well. Against White, they even had a game where certain players were behind and they managed to get back in still. In general, was there a component of the final where, do you think Blue had never faced real adversity where it's like, we're actually going to get our asses beaten, it's going to, like, we're going to lose this whole final? Had they ever really been tested in that sense before, do you think?
Not, I don't think, in recent memory. They've had, obviously, nobody's ever pushed them really to that blind pick game, so they've been pretty confident in terms of their victories. But it's, the same flaw that we had been talking about, the storyline over the course of the playoffs. This is a team that falls behind early. Somebody is eventually going to punish them for it, but they don't have a reason to fix that problem until that problem is exposed. And it just hasn't been to a satisfactory degree, because if you're Samsung Blue, you're like, well, we just won 3-0 against the Generous Stealth. We were down 8,000 gold, but we came back. Look at us. Aren't we great?
So then which is it, Monty? Do you put your money on which is it? It's 2 scenarios. One, KTA have really raised their level and they're going to be very good, and now maybe Blue is beatable, and now maybe people can see, and now maybe Blue isn't the best team in the world? Or is it that actually this somehow takes Blue to an even higher level where they realize the one area that they are weak, or figure out some sort of way to neutralize that, and then they're just totally unstoppable, and now they are the killers at Worlds? Which do you think of the two is most likely?
I think that the KT Arrows just have the proper players and synergy to take Blue to task. And I don't think that they're going to win every best of 5, just given how close that one was and Blue's ability to make these comebacks and Blue's kind of arguably better pick and ban phase. But no other player has that like rookie Cacao duo. And that's something that you can't just make on a team. Like, you can't just be like, well, good thing I'm going to turn my jungler into Cacao now. No, that just doesn't happen. So I don't think that Blue actually probably has to even really be concerned about shoring up this weakness, because I think this weakness only exists in isolation against the KT Arrows.
I think Blue, though, did show evolution over the course of the games and picking up what the Arrows were doing. Again, I talked about, like Game 4, by the end of it, everyone was doing these crazy fights. Like, Blue showed a couple of times, like, hey, you want a crazy teleport? Like, they were able to pick that up and to change it. It was almost like we saw literally the teams both evolving in certain aspects. Like the KT Arrows, their warding got better as the series went on, and Blue got more ham.
And also Blue, yeah, that's true. And Blue showed greater team comp diversity over the series too. I mean, that Kale comp was very interesting, I feel. The Kale Cassidy comp was super interesting. Well,
it speaks to the fact that like they're so good at the pick ban phase. And I think, again, like that, the fact that it had to come to a blind pick game, that you think that KT Arrows could not have won without a blind pick, that's just that other element. Like, I feel like Korean teams are going to beat teams before the game even starts because the pick ban phase is so strong. Like, that's, to me, is terrifying, especially against Chinese teams. They don't know what the fuck's going on.
They just pick Jarvan into everything.
Yep, pretty much.
So
the thing about picking Jarvan against really good Korean junglers like Kakao and Dandy is they will fuck your shit up in the jungle. Like they will just walk in and fuck you up, and like that's I don't see that going very well for them.
let me play devil's advocate there, Monty. Someone made me a case that I think actually made sense. That part of the reason why that meta of junglers is so fucked up in China, like picking stuff like Jarvan and Skarner, is because it's all based around what they have to do against like the Super Beast AD carry who has the 6 items. It's like 40 minutes into the game. So it's a different sort of game they're playing, okay? So as a result, let me put that the other way around. What if a game happens where a Chinese team goes late game with the Korean team and they're not super far ahead, and now that AD carry, who's perfect at using peel and positioning, and he looks like a god versus all the Koreans, he's never played against that Jarvan at 41 minutes, right?
The Korean teams won't fight you. Like if they know that that's going to happen and that's the outcome, they're not going to engage you in a team fight, not willingly. And it takes so many flash and ult cooldowns to force that engagement from the Chinese team. They can only do it once every few minutes.
Do you think is it that easy? Is it that cut and dry, Froskurinn?
There are better teams at forcing engagements. Like I feel like LMQ is almost like a microcosm of like China and kind of how it's impacted the Western world, even though they definitely have their North American influences on them right now. Literally, and I don't know why people aren't realizing this, when you beat LMQ, it's because you beat them strategically. Like you can see the confusion, like do we go bottom, do we go top, how do we deal with this? As soon as teams start losing to LMQ, it's because they picked a dragon fight or they picked some sort of 5v5 engagement and suddenly they just get rocked instead of just continuing to play the map pressure game and kind of give them a runaround or play the vision game. Like you think back when Dignitas first unseated LMQ, it was literally like one ward that they placed in the very beginning of the jungle that pretty much unseated all of LMQ because for whatever reason Dignitas decided to be geniuses that game. I think the same thing, yeah, Monty's right. The Koreans are very good at, the counter engage. We saw that in the final between Arrow and Blue. And frankly, like KT Arrow is almost effectively a better Chinese team than some of the Chinese teams. And if Blue can successfully disengage those guys as many times, the Chinese, they'll bring so many tools to fight you, which is why Jarvan will always be such a big pick, why Skarner will always be such a big pick. It's about tower diving and forcing those engagements. But I mean, if you're a region that's so far ahead that you can just successfully continually run them around, then that's how you win. You will not beat a Chinese team if you fight it.
Yeah, we've seen that. Why do you think the Chinese don't run Nocturne?
I feel like Nocturne is really reliant on his lanes, and the issue is like playing him perfectly, because if you think like if a Nocturne's going to ult in over the top, if a team disengages correctly, you're immediately going to pull this guy completely away from his team. And I think that is a big issue, that the junglers just aren't strong enough to recognize that situation. I feel like Nocturne is much more, again, about a jungler that takes advantage of vision information and reacting that way, as opposed to just like, I mean, Jarvan, it's just, you very straightforward run in Cataclysm, whereas Nocturne, there's much more finesse to it.
There's also no chance of accidentally following somebody too far, like with flash or some shit. Yeah. Okay,
so let's do some shadow boxing then with the West and China, because we've done China and Korea, we've done these matchups, and I did the 2v2s, okay, but what if we take actual teams? Like we take, I mean, at the moment we don't know NA, so we'll have to speculate there. If LMQ has to come and play top Chinese teams, if you take aside from the psychological component, how would they do, Froskurinn?
I think they'd get wrecked. I think LMQ, I think their strongest points are WeiXiao and Vasily. I don't think Vasily can compete, especially with more alongside him, against any of the duo lanes, even Son, and if he brings Tricky Boy. I don't think Ackerman in his current form could deal with someone like Going. WeiXiao was never considered a top-tier mid in China, and especially because, again, I cannot emphasize enough, like, everyone talks about the AD carries, but literally 6 out of the last mid laners from, spring split to summer split are completely different. You have people like Diangoon, like Cool, like Korn, these mid laners, so mid just got super powered in China as far as what we've seen previously, and WeiXiao just doesn't compete. And
Vasily? What about lovely Vasily?
The nice thing about TS is that he actually has international experience. He played for eHome.
I'm sorry, hipster. Did you prefer him when he was called TS? My bad. Okay, continue.
I had to go back to TS because I was going to drop eHome, and I feel like a lot of, because if you look at Wikipedia, they think that Alan is the same Alan from World Elite Academy. He has a lot of international experience, and he was actually good friends of PDD. And there's kind of some thought that PDD might have helped Vasily, you know, learn, which kind of makes sense if you think about how Vasily like plays Tristana, like how aggressive it is, and you know, jumping forward. If you think about who PDD is as a player, I think he's interesting. I think he's probably the strongest point of LMQ. Ackerman's pretty good, but I really like Vasily. But as far as again against Uzi and Zero, it's not going to matter.
So okay, answer me this, because even if people, okay, we've gone through the stages of denial that people are in the West, okay. They've finally, you know, they've come to acceptance through enough repeated beatdowns that, okay, Korea is going to beat them, okay. And Koreans are the best, and especially they now, even the ones who don't watch OGN have heard word that, okay, actually Korea this time might send their strongest teams ever comparative to themselves and the rest of the world, okay. So that's a lost cause to some degree. But I get the sense that most Westerners, and you were saying before, they don't watch LPL, so I don't know where they're basing this on. Just hope, I guess. They really don't believe that the Chinese teams are going to be significantly better than them in any sense, okay? But answer me this, okay? If the NA couldn't really deal with LMQ, how are they going to deal with, like, the 2v2s that are going to come from fucking China?
This is exactly what we've been talking about, like, on China Talk and all of these LPL broadcasts, and I have literally zero idea where this delusion is coming from the Western world. Like, you literally have LMQ in North America karate chopping teams in the throat, like just ripping through a lot of teams, and they're like, China's not a threat, we can take care of that. Like, LMQ was a 6th place LPL team, and we say that, but even if you look at the true roster that LMQ was, it was only more, what was it? It was like more No Name were on it, and WeiXiao. The 80 carry that they had, Avenger Fish, whatever you want to call him, was actually 10 times better than Vasily. So they actually downgraded there. They got a huge upgrade in their top laner with Ackerman, godlike. So I agree with that. But this is a 6th place LPL team, players that just didn't perform very well. And it's beating all these North American teams, but they just completely overlooked that. The LMQ's North American now. They're an NA team. That's what people will say, and I just find that very curious.
So doesn't this, like, I've made this point before when Monty said that certain teams would be better, or that China as a region would lose in a certain sense, is like, I always stress this point. It doesn't even matter if you know what to do to beat someone. If you can't do it, it's fucking irrelevant. It's if you know what the counter is, but you can't execute it, you still don't win. And so even if the style was inferior, if they can't, if LMQ are this stupid, and they're not stupid. Okay, stupid is the wrong word. If they're just that ignorant of the conceptual way to play the game now most efficiently, okay. For example, when I looked at the stats of them, it did look like a lot of scenarios where they never understood that if they had leads, they could just turn that lead into objectives and win like that. They thought to themselves, I have a lead, I have more kills, I have more gold, turn that into items, go and get even more kills people some even more, get even more kills, and eventually when you have all the kills, somehow the game ends at some point. Like we hit a nexus or something, like something happens, and eventually you win the game. They never sort of figured out, well, if I put it like that, then I could sit down all these players from Curse and Cloud9 and tell them, listen, you know that's how they're going to play, you know that's what they're going to do, and so you guys just think that, go into the game knowing that, and you can beat them, right? I'm sure they do know that, but they can't beat them, right, Froskurinn?
They don't know how to disengage from them properly. Again, like if you just watch LMQ against North American teams, it's like everything is going right. The North American team is giving them the runaround, playing the strategic game, but it just comes to that one dragon fight, that one catch, and suddenly LMQ is like back in it. I mean, of course, there's been cases where LMQ has been overthrown, but anytime I see them lose, it's literally a strategical loss. Like LMQ, I feel like how they win is they just brute force mechanically through these North American teams.
Or they farm.
Into the late game, and then it's just the 5v5, and who can 5v5 better? The ex-Chinese professional players or the Western teams?
Mm-hmm. I feel like actually the big problem here is that it's not that NA and China are different. Actually, deep down they're the same, and they're star-crossed lovers. And so what happens is these analysts have come in, these goddamn geeks with their pocket protectors and their compasses, and I don't even T-square. I'm running out of things that measure things that I know that geeks like, okay, they've come in and these nerds have come in with all the jocks, because Americans deep down, they're jocks, the people who play games, okay? They've come in and these nerds, these Poindexters have been telling us, do this and get that tower and all that. And so even when we've realized, okay, it does make us win and we get an edge over our rivals, so, okay, fuck it, just keep doing what they're saying. Keep doing what the nerds saying. We'll keep winning these games, okay? What happens is the Chinese team, within all of that, within the moment of battle, things slow down for a second and they cross eyes meet. And within that second, within Vasily, his rage, his berserker fury to want to battle and just do war, it goes out of him, his soul, and it enters Doublelift's eyes, and it connects with that part of him. And he's like, oh, this is all I've ever wanted. And like a moth to a flame, they go into that dragon fight, that Baron fight, and they know they shouldn't. They know what he's going to tell them afterwards, but they have to see what would happen in that fight.
That is a very accurate description of what happens in the LMQ CLG scrims.
What do you think, Froskurinn?
I think you're exactly right. For whatever reason, they just can't. And it's every single time. Like the North, I keep saying this. Literally every single time, the North American teams, they like have a lead, and literally as soon as it comes to grouping up, they just completely space it. I think we should fight them now. Never mind, that was an awful idea. Vasily just got a pentakill.
I just get the sense that NA teams have never seen a team fight they didn't like the look of. Like even Cloud9 are a really good strategical team, and if they do have the lead, they will go that way. Cloud9 love to team fight, and they used to be so good, they would even take them when they were slightly behind. You know, I actually get the sense that that's actually going to be NA's downfall against the East, is like willingness to team fight at the wrong time.
Yeah, it's the OMG syndrome, man. OMG plays against the Koreans, like doesn't fall into that trap, but as soon as they hit Royal, like for whatever reason,
Gotta fight. Gotta take him out.
But I will say this, Monty, and you must agree, because fucking KT Arrow's your favorite team. Taking aside, like, intellectual ideals and aspirations for what we want to be, we want to lift humanity up, Monty, and be these thinkers who appreciate the world. We don't just think of the physical form. In the actual game, it is exciting as fuck to watch retarded ass ham fights where people just bash on each other completely, and they're like, well, I'm going to punch you in the head. You can punch me in the head 9 times if it means I can punch you in the head 10 times. Like, that sort of mentality is really good to watch. Right?
Well, that's why I found those finals so fun, and I think that the most telling moment in that finals was when Kakao like went to gank top lane, and they were trying to kill Mundo, right? And he's playing Lee Sin, and he's standing in the brush, and they're about to dive the Mundo, and I was like, they don't know where the enemy jungler is. You shouldn't do this. And then I basically was like, well, it's the KT Heroes. They're going to do it anyway. And then they dove and got double killed. And I was like, I guess I should just expect that.
That sequence, by the way, is one of the most retarded sequences I've ever. It goes from we do a tower dive to we get chased down to we're being chased 4v2. One gets out and then you just kill someone. It's like, that is possibly the most retarded outcome of a tower dive ever in a fucking finals game.
It was hilarious, though, because it's like, I was like, this is a bad idea. And then I immediately knew, like, the light went off, and I was like, but they're going to do it anyway. They don't care.
Let me ask you a question here, Monty. We've noticed this trend that happens in the Korean teams where, okay, go as far back, Frost and Blaze used to both have the same strength. They had these weak AD carries where if you just got them out of the laning phase and they only had a slight disadvantage, then they would still win because they'd out-team fight you and they'd have superior team fighting. And they even had the same strengths at similar positions. Go forwards. Then you go to like Samsung Blue, Samsung White. Similarly styled teams, so amazing at setting up the team fight and know when to take the team fight that they want and how to position and how to win it. If we see these, we can think to ourselves, there must be some element of coaching deciding the style here, okay? Because you've got 2 sister teams who are sharing similar qualities. Why do KT Arrows have this risk style? And Bullets had that to a degree, right? They still wanted to take, if they had that moment, it's like they'd narrow every game down to a 5-second moment where they'd say, should we just do Baron now? And then most of the time, they just said yes, right? Both of them had this really risky approach, right?
But no, they rarely threw Baron, though. That's the thing, is that the KT Bullets were so good at getting that Baron that it was very low risk for them.
Do you
there
think
weren't very many Bullets Baron throws.
Do you think that suggests, though, that the style or the identity of a team in some way comes from the organization itself more than just the player, like the players you have together? What do you think? Is that just a correlation?
That were a little bit risky or tricky around the Baron and calls, but they were not crazy aggressive early like the KT are. In fact, I see those teams as being very different.
Sure. I just meant the willingness to take these big risks. So that's actually something in general the Korean teams don't seem to want to do, you know. So it's interesting. Two teams under the same org would have that impulse.
Yeah, I mean, we saw that impulse from Samsung Blue as well. I think there was the game where they took the two-man Baron at like 20 minutes to keep them in the game against the Arrows, and that was an extremely impressive call from them.
At least Mundo, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's one of the main reasons I got Froskurinn on the show now is I wanted to set it up. Since I actually think LPL has some awesome games, but if you're like me, I don't care about regular season of any fucking league, okay? There's too much good esports to watch for me to watch some fucking LCS game between the bad teams, okay? So I always wait for the playoffs. And the main reason to watch the big games is to get hyped for the big playoff game and have context, okay? So I wanted to have you on the show now so we can kind of preview the playoffs for LPL, and then people who want to get in now have some context to get in and watch the games and enjoy them now, because now's the time to get on board, right, before Worlds, to see how good these Chinese teams are. So the two matchups we have, give me your thoughts on them. So the first one we have is Royal Club against, isn't it, EDG?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's
No, Royal
OMG
Club
versus LGD.
Right, yeah.
Oh, no, it's Starhorn Royal. Yes.
Okay, so it's EDG LGD?
Yes.
Right, and OMG Royal Club.
Yeah.
Give me the Royal Club OMG one first, because I get the sense that's the one with more variables in it.
The
Jax. The Jax.
Oh God. Cola is special. The last time that these teams faced, the games were very, very close. In fact, I think the second game OMG should have won. It was a, in my personal opinion, it was a glitched out ward that OMG actually made a Baron call when they had a very deep pink in the pit, and they made the Baron call thinking that Starhorn Royal Club did not have the vision of it, and they got burned by a very nice shockwave from Korn. The matchups of these teams in particular. So I think Korn is very underrated, and I think when Starhorn Royal Club finds success, it's when they give more responsibility. Because at the very beginning of the split, it was all about WeiXiao, it was all about inSec, and like that's where they would put their gold. When they find success, it's when they actually give responsibility to Korn. They let him play. His Orianna is amazing. I mean, Peke could not play a better Orianna than this guy. I think one of the most amazing plays I've seen him make is he actually he had his ball on himself, and the enemy team was doing Baron, and he dissonances himself, and he flashes in, and he shockwaves at the same time. Like, he's mid-animation shockwave when he flashes, and he lands on the Baron and steals it, and then just, like, takes out the entire team. It was fantastic, but that's the type of guy this is, and they're a completely ham team. Where they don't match up, though, is going to be the top lane. So their top laner, Cola, is a very special kind of special. And facing against OMG, you're going up against Going, which I feel like, unfortunately, I haven't had a lot of time to talk about the top laners, Going in particular. This guy is amazing. He can stand toe-to-toe with any top laner in the world. He is amazing.
A few names, please. Could I ask you for a few names?
I'll throw down Acorn, Looper,
you still haven't got the best
Flame.
one yet. Sure. Okay.
He had his Lord Flame moment with his Shyvana play the 2v1.
Okay.
He effectively is the Lord Flame of China. Very aggressive.
So he's as
player.
good as any of the Korean top laners.
Yes, I definitely think Going could compete. For when OMG is playing poorly, Going is always on point, and he's almost the hard carry of the team.
How has Going managed to do what no other really good top laner has done, which is survive in the era of these teleport fucking noobs?
He's the reason why he's so good is how his teleports are really good. The one thing that I will say about Western teams, especially if OMG does go to Worlds, and they, for whatever reason, if Son and Coma just choke, Going will destroy them. He will just teleport down there and just wreck you. But in context of Starhorn Royal Club, WeiXiao and Zero are going to crush Son and Tricky Boy, but Going is going to monster Cola. And it's just about if Korn can get the champion to deal with Cool, and if Drug is having a good day. And inSec doesn't play Rengar. Keep that guy off that champion.
Well, it is a double elimination bracket, though, so there is a possibility to come back from this.
Playoffs, yes. I'm trying to think about between regionals and playoffs. I know one of them, I think playoffs is a best of 5, and regionals is double elim best of 3.
I'm looking at a playoff bracket right now on Esportspedia, and it does appear to be there is a losers bracket.
Yeah, it's double elim, I believe, for the LPL playoffs.
I'll have to check with Kelsey, because I think they switched it
There's
last
possibility that, yeah, there is a possibility this is wrong, obviously.
to best of 5. My understanding is that every single day, so tomorrow or in precisely like 5 hours for me, it's the best of 5.
And it says matches are best of 5 and double elim, but I don't know if this is accurate.
It could be the double elim.
Grand final, the team from the winner's bracket starts with a 1-0 advantage.
I just cast them.
I know how that is. I know how that is.
So, okay, what Monte's essentially asking there is, okay, if they meet once, then it's easy to go, okay, there's more room to it. If they actually have a double elim aspect where, in theory, you really do have to be better if you might have to meet the same team twice, or you might meet them once and then they can learn something and play you again. Overall, if they play the first time, let's say somehow OMG manages to win despite the 2v2 disparity at bottom. If they play again, overall, you're predicting OMG to come out ahead against Royal Club when they have a potential 2 meetings they might have.
Royal Club's playing too well, I think. If OMG's in current form, Royal Club's going to win. If OMG shows up how they did in the middle of the split, then OMG will hands down mow through it. But the issue has been that OMG kind of dropped off at the finish line.
Before I leave the OMG topic, I have a quick question for you, which is, Drug has shown himself to be really good at both support and jungler. So the reason we were told before as to why he went back to support was that Pomelo, both of them preferred to be jungler. And so they let Pomelo do it for a while. Surely if you're playing against all these monster bot lanes and Sun himself already is going to have problems matching up against the NaMei type people, wouldn't it make more sense to have Drug down there in the bottom lane with him? So you've got someone else who's like a really good player and potentially can enhance your AD carry?
That would make sense. I know that Drug prefers jungle, but I think the bigger issue is the synergy between Cool and Drug. When they're on point, and you just can't do anything about it. Again, it's a consistency issue. It always has been. And I think that's kind of the real sell to keep Drug in the jungle, not only because it's his preference, but because he's also one of the master tacticians of that team. And so putting him in a more controlling position.
I just love, this is one of the things about China that could only exist in China. Yeah, I know I'm one of the best supports in the whole world, but I really don't prefer it, quite frankly. I'd really be much happier if someone else played this position. No, but we really need you, man. We need you down there. Like, listen, I'll do it if I have to, but could I please just play some jungle? Like, it's like a fucking solo queue game or something, yeah.
I'll do it sometimes.
It's like you've got fucking Afromu in a solo queue game, and he's like, dude, I'd really rather play AD carry this game. Like, I just don't want to. And you're like, what, we need to win. I need those LP Afromu. Okay, so...
it's funny, too.
Thoughts?
I just want to talk about his Thresh, because he gets this... At All-Stars, he had, like, ridiculous... Everyone was hyping up all the casters, like, oh my god, this Thresh, his kill participation is insane, he's hitting all these crazy hooks. He can't play Thresh. Like, literally, if you look at his stats in LPL as a Thresh player, I don't know if, like, the North American teams can't dodge or what it is, but this guy, like, could not play Thresh. He shows up at All-Stars, and suddenly he's, like, a Thresh god. So I don't know what happened there.
Well, that's a positive for the West to take in their back pocket. There's a freebie for you there, guys. That's not even a chat he's good on. Okay, let's go to the other matchup. Is there any universe that EDG can actually win a best of 5 over LGD can win over EDG?
It's weird too, because the Western team, I guess I'll call us the 3 people and the 10 people that actually listen to them believe, like, we give EDG such a hard time, which I frankly feel it's very deserved, especially for the pressure going on that they're representing China. But they're so respected in China between the teams. Like, if you ask LGD and OMG, like, if you ask the teams themselves and the players, like, who they think the best team in China is, they'll always say EDG. And that, to me, is really bizarre because they've been on a very downward spiral. As far as LGD matching up and beating EDG, I think it's possible if they get a very good early game. Again, it's always been an issue that you have to close early against EDG. You can't allow them to do what they want, which is just to kind of farm it out and group it at 50 minutes and just have a superior team fight and then win the game all from there, which has kind of been like their signature MO. So I think it's possible for LGD. The issue, though, is that their jungler, Twin, is one of the worst junglers, possibly the worst jungler in LPL, actually. Like, that guy is either on or he's off. And it's not even like a 50-50. It's like a 60-40.
If we actually do get... Well, no, forget that. Let's hypothetically move forward in the bracket. If EDG plays either OMG or Royal Club, are they still a favorite to win this LPL outright?
I think if EDG played Starhorn Royal Club, they would beat them. I think OMG could beat EDG.
What does OMG have that makes them different in that sense?
I think the experience of their players. I think a lot of it has to do again, with like the mid lane matchup, Cool versus you, and I think what Cool would offer his team and what OMG would be able to do with it. Because EDG wants to just play kind of a stall out lane phase, wait for a team fight, OMG, very good at team fighting in their own right. And then again, you talk about the weakness of OMG being their bot lane. Like if you aren't going to, like you have Clear Love. Like if he's not going to pressure that and exploit that weakness, I'm sorry, you're going to lose to Cool and Go Going are going to exploit you.
I mean, thing is though, when you referenced before where you had Cool and he's going to end up on the top X list, I think if EDG can win this season of LPL, I think NaMei already has to be on that list. He already has to be top 10 all time. If he's won 3 playoffs in a row in China as an AD carry, he's supposed to be pretty fucking good as the hard carry, right?
He's really good. People give him a hard time because they see Uziai's pentakill and they want to go into the comparison. They say NaMei's playing like shit or whatever, but that guy's really smart and he's really good at positioning. What he can do and how safe he can stay on a champion like Kog'Maw. The number one issue for actually EDG and OMG right now is that they keep playing Lucian. I cannot emphasize this enough. Like I took the stats from it. Lucian wasn't disabled. There's 0 disabled champions in LPL. When a champion gets disabled for bugs or whatever, it doesn't happen. They just let it through. So Lucian got to play in LPL when he was, that ridiculous. They only had him really for a week there, and surprise, surprise, Starhorn World Cup shot up during that time period. But since Lucian has been changed on the 4.13 patch, he has been played in 8 games, and he's only won 1 of them. And it was actually LGD's AD carry that won on him. WeiXiao, Uziai, NaMei, they've all lost on this champion. Kid, like they just cannot win with him. And instead of playing Tristana and Kog'Maw, they immediately go back to Lucian and Corki. And again, it's prioritizing that like self-sustain. I have no idea why they're not playing Tristana. And that really scares me for going into Worlds.
Okay. So, that's like a preview of the playoffs there. In actual regionals for China, you have this retarded system where it's actually very, very good. I think it's one of the best regionals there, but it's just so hard to understand. Essentially, as far as I can tell, if EDG wins now, if you win both splits, you automatically get a seed. But if you're everyone except EDG, or even including EDG, if you don't win this playoffs, then the top 4 teams over the 2 splits go into a regional.
No.
It's there's a best of 3 between it too.
What do you mean?
It's so if EDG doesn't win, since EDG won spring, they're already entered into a best of 3 after the split. So immediately whoever wins playoffs has to
EDG.
And the loser of that has to drop down into the actual random seed regional bracket. And that person who wins gets the automatic qualification spot for Worlds. So it's emphasizing current performance versus past performance, but still allotting you points for it.
Okay, so here's my question then.
So the 2 champions...
It's still a 4 team though, right?
Yeah, it's the top 4 teams. And IG. It's EDG, IG will for sure get an invitation even if they don't split, and then it's LGD, OMG, and Starhorn Royal Club.
Right, okay. The reason why I actually like that, though, is because I actually recommended this myself as to what I thought a hypothetical for the LCS could be. It's like a mixture between the two. You have like a sort of a circuit point aspect where you don't really get the first place no matter what, unless you do just straight up win both splits, in which case you probably are the best team anyway. But you also still reward someone if they won the first split. It's not like you say, well, fuck off, you did badly in this last 2 weeks, so you're out of the whole thing. Like, you kind of, the mixture of the two, right?
I think it's a good system. My only issue, though, is, again, the timing of all of it. The fact that it's taking them so long, prep time for Worlds, things like that. But that's, no complaint against the actual system itself.
Okay, so I've just realized I never actually got to the point where we were going to pit Western teams against the Chinese teams. We actually got sidetracked completely into some other shit. Like, I think rather than just put Team A against Team B, the more interesting way to do it is kind of how I tried to do it on the Korean one. Try and find the teams who are better counters or would have a better chance against the other team, from that region. So which Western team has the best chance against, like, EDG in Froskurinn's book?
In EDG, I think Cloud9 would do well. Just because, again, they're emphasizing team fighting, so they're already okay at that. I think... Again, the reason why I like CLG, even though, Monty's sitting at the call, so it's like awkward, is I think that I've always thought that CLG probably had the best chance at beating a Chinese team just because they're trying to emulate the Korean teams more closely in a like a strategical element. And I think that as far as teams like not fighting, although there's that case when, you know, double it flashes into 5 people, but
Sure.
I think if they're able to implement that strategy, I think that they would do fairly well.
You really, in that case, you really do bow to the Korean teams, because what you're saying is, since CLG is sort of like the 27th best Korean team, then obviously they'd beat a Chinese team.
I think that they would do better against the Chinese team. I don't think it's can they run? How fast are they? Because the Chinese teams will chase them all over the map. What Karma?
Is no one from Europe going to enter this equation here for you?
Europe. Let's see. Alliance and Fnatic, the only 2 teams that matter. And I'm thinking about, frankly, what concerns me about Alliance, again, is like Wicked and Shook, in all honesty. Just watching Fnatic versus Alliance, not just in the finals, but, you know, during the regular season is really concerning, because I think Wicked is not very solid a player. And again, thinking about the top laners that he'll face, particularly going. I don't know. I think that Cloud9 probably has the best chance. I don't think any of the European teams have a really good chance. I think they're too weak across the board, whereas I think Cloud9, I wouldn't say that they have, you know, particularly superstars in every region, but cohesive as a team. I think they're stronger across the board, especially in the top lane with balls, versus, you know, just dealing with like the superstar of Froggen, and then, you know, you have all these other weak, rotted pillars around him.
What do you think, Monty? Which Western teams have the best chances against Chinese teams, do you think? EDG, let's just go with EDG first.
I agree with Cloud9. I think the team plays an early game advantage, and I think the Cloud9 is good at getting those early game advantages and snowballing them. It's beautiful. Say like TSM.
Wait there a second. Your voice has gone robot-y again, so we may as well just don't let it go too long. Wait a sec.
I do want to add, though, since one more point about Cloud9, what I think is unique about them is they are so good at turning early, because since Monty talked about their early objective control, they are so good at turning that early dragon or early objective control into vision. Like immediately they'll get an early dragon and they'll go and buy wards and they'll ward out the jungle. And again, that's so proficient against, you know, teams like China who are lackluster there. And I think that's a big, important factor for them.
Okay, try now, Monty.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it sounds great now.
By far the best chance. I think maybe TSM if they could get an early lead with Bjergsen, but I don't really see that happening.
Well, Monty, that would require TSM to get the world, so don't go within the realms of reality, please. Anyway, what about the European teams? Do you think, without, obviously you haven't seen EU playoffs yet, do you think any of the EU teams have a chance against someone like EDG?
I think the European teams match up better against the NA teams, and I think that the NA teams match up better against the Chinese teams.
See, I'm surprised, Froskurinn. I'm really surprised in you, because I thought you would say that EDG Alliance would be an awesome matchup. To me, OMG Fnatic's a great matchup, and EDG Alliance is a fun matchup.
I honestly, like, my big thing that I really, like, pimp out for China, like, why should you watch LPL? Why should you care? What can I learn from this? It's team fighting. It's macro or micro team fighting strategy. And when you watch Alliance team fight, that is awful. Like, you have Wicked playing Alistar, and he'll flash in, and he'll have his Unbreakable Will, and literally his entire team is in spectator mode, just, like, watching this happen. And the Unbreakable Will, you know, is done, and Wicked's, like, pretty much flashing out, and Shook's like, oh, I tag team, it's my turn to go in. Tries the Q for his Lee Sin, misses, flashes in, dies.
So then do you not have any kind of faith in Fnatic then? I mean, Fnatic if anything, wouldn't Fnatic OMG be a good matchup then? I mean, wouldn't that be like skirmishes, lots of fights all around the map?
The issue with Fnatic is I honestly feel like Fnatic has never actually changed in playstyle. I actually feel that when Fnatic had their high rise during Season 3, it's like literally the meta shifted into them. It was like, again, that assassin, you go into an area of the jungle, you control the entire vision, and you force the enemy team to make a rotation into you, and you like pick one and you go for an objective. I honestly feel like Fnatic had continuously been playing like that. Like, you think about the stereotype there was like the Fnatic brush, where they just randomly stand in a point and just wait for someone to walk into them. I don't think that was manufactured. I think that it was just something that they did, and at the time when they were on like their high rise, it was because that was just really potent and powerful, not necessarily that they manufactured themselves to be that, because they've, you know, publicly stated that they don't really do coaching and strategy. They just all kind of show up at the end as like, hey guys, you know, it's a week before Worlds, better start buckling down. And that's my issue with Fnatic, and like watching the Alliance Fnatic game during the regular LPL season, and Fnatic had just taken Baron, and they had a Jarvan on their team. And I think this is when I was really critical of the European teams. If I remember correctly, Alliance had Riven Orianna, a very like disengage, hard engage kite composition, because you're thinking you're playing with dissonance and then the Orianna or the Riven Q combo, whatever it is, and you have this Jarvan, you have this Baron, and Fnatic is terrified. They don't engage. They literally like have this chance to push up mid, and they don't recognize it, and they don't recognize the strength of their composition. I actually wanted to go back and like time how long they sat on Jarvanal. Effectively, Cyanide doesn't do anything with that champion. It's like a 4v5. Like if you have this threat, you need to identify what is this champion good at, and instead they played a kite comp and they eventually lost out to Alliance. And it was bizarre to me, and I was just looking at Fnatic like, you can't make that mistake against a Chinese team. Like if you have this threat, if you have this weapon, you have to identify what does this composition do, what are my win conditions, and you have to execute them. And I feel like Fnatic doesn't have that.
Okay, so people might be able to accept, okay, EDG can be very good, OMG have very good at their style. But if Royal Club goes and Royal Club plays against Fnatic and Alliance, are you also going to tell me Royal Club's just going to trash them?
I think at different points in the game. It's weird. Like if Royal Club gets a snowball, they just continuously snowball. Their end game is kind of shaky, but their mid game is really strong.
I think Royal relies more on like late game hyper carries and hoping that they get there to win rather than on consistent late game strategy.
I can see that with UZI, but I think that recently their turn has been getting Corn involved in creating like a mid game snowball for UZI to like have that late game power at like 30 minutes. I don't know, that's hard. Alliance, I don't feel like they really do anything. I think that it would kind of depend on if inSec was playing well that game and if Shook wasn't. I feel like Shook would kind of wander into inSec. And if it ever comes to like a 3v3 bottom, like jungler lane, that's an issue for Alliance. I feel like Royal Club would win that.
Okay, at this point, Monty hasn't seen LCS, so I think in a future show, we can, like in next week or something, we can talk more about LCS EU actual results once Monty's seen them and we can get his opinion. But for now, since me and Froskurinn saw those games, we'll just talk a little bit about them. And so before we go into this, actually, just to bridge from the point you were just making there, the reason why I think you're actually like, I think both of you are like underselling the European teams a bit, because I think a key mistake you can make, I'll relate it to my experiences in Counter-Strike, okay? In Counter-Strike, you would always get these scenarios where within one country, because we didn't have all these regions in the world, in reality, Europe was the best by far, because it was just the countries within Europe with the separate states that you were thinking of, like China and Korea and so on. So it was like this. Within certain countries, okay, the best team, say the #1 team in France, is actually like the second best team in the whole world. Even if the second best team in France is only the 7th best team in the world, it will often be incredibly close when those two teams play just in France. Because part of what tends to make up how a team plays is, yeah, obviously the specific personnel is going to dictate what your identity is. But you notice, even in all these other games like League of Legends, there is a certain cultural identity within the game that exists. Like the metagame that exists within that one region, and how they've all played each other and how they've all come up through other teams and what style of leadership they had or what they thought was the way to win the game and the correct way to play. And because of that factor, and then the familiarity of playing each other a ton of times, so you know, like, he's going to do this and he knows I'm going to do that. You add those together and it tends to make regional matchups way closer than actually the levels of the teams are. It's the reason why I'm bringing this up now is because I feel like in all the regionals, people are going to see this. They're going to see KTA beats Blue. They're going to see SK almost beats Alliance. I'll guarantee in LCS NA, there'll be a matchup where one of the teams who's an underdog does really closely and almost beats the better team. Don't make the mistake of thinking that means the underdog is on the same level as the better team and internationally will do as well. Because I want to bring this up now, because I think as we go into this discussion, the first semi-final I really want to talk about is SK versus Alliance, where, I mean, what were your first impressions for Froskurinn?
That was way too close for comfort. Again, team fighting from Alliance was just really, really poor. And even when Shook was on his best champion, Lee Sin, which again supposedly his best champion, I feel like he's really good at like jungling with that champion, but as far as like his team fight impact, I feel like as far as the team fight coordination from Alliance on a whole, and again I'm commenting as a spectator of Chinese League of Legends, so that is the context that I'm using. It's just not there for me. And I look at, you know, mistimed ults and wonky compositions and walking into weird fights where it's too close for comfort. And the fact that Froggen has to effectively like fake or carry through that series was pretty concerning.
Okay. In this series, Alliance won it 3-1, and in the end, they got the fights they needed. At the end, they had the big plays. They had Froggen carrying. He had the moment, so he had like Justana. Oh, that was actually the final to some degree. I think they played it one game there. Overall, what were your thoughts on SK? I mean, SK almost won this series, even though they lost it 3-1, right? I think almost every game was winnable for them.
Yeah.
Did it change your feeling on SK as a team? I mean, coming into the let me give you the context. Coming into the playoffs, when I did Summoning Insight, everyone on the show that week told me Millennium was going to beat SK. Whereas the thing I've always thought about SK was you can see there's something about them where when they play teams, they find out some strategical edge they can have in some way, whether that's a pick in a lane or whether it is just like, here's a way we can attack them where they'll be weak at this point, you know. What did you think? Did this change how you thought of SK? Was it where you thought they could be anyway?
It's hard for me to say because I wasn't really examining SK. I was more so looking at Alliance just because to me they're the true competition going in. Like if I'm going to break down, I thought that SK was more organized and how they were trying to fight Alliance. But again, the fact that they've lost to Froggen says something. So that's like an issue for me already there. But otherwise, frankly, I don't really have anything to say. I haven't examined SK enough to really speak on them. Whereas I feel like with Fnatic and Alliance, I'll be very outspoken and very opinionated in those teams because I've looked very closely at them.
Okay. Well, what did you think of the other semi-final then, the Roccat Fnatic, which again, that was ridiculously, it went 3-2. That was one where everyone said, oh, that should definitely be the 3-0, you know?
I want to talk about Overpow Zilean, like specifically. I thought how he used that champion. I know like Overpow, he's like so inconsistent. Some people were saying he was going to be great. You know, he had that then like nosedive kind of in the middle of a split, but his Zilean play, particularly on a dragon fight, like typically when a team takes a dragon fight, you all, in most cases, you want to come from the same side. Like if you get too split up, you have to be like perfectly coordinated if you're really going to attack a team from all corners, because otherwise if one person is out of position, that they're just going to turn and it's a 4v5 suddenly. The fact that Overpow was smart enough to utilize the Zilean ult as a pinch maneuver was, I always find Roccat very creative and they're very fun to watch. The fact that they were one of the first European teams, I think maybe the first European team to bring out the Alistar top lane, and not just recognizing like the strength of Alistar in the top lane, but recognizing that you couldn't play him on a 1v1 to lane swap him to help strengthen his roam potential. So like as far as like a team thinking outside of the box, I've always really liked watching Roccat because of that.
And what did you think of the final overall? I mean, what's sad is the two semi-finals were fucking awesome games. You were like, what a great series.
And then the finals were like...
And then you're thinking, wow, now the finals should be like, this is the match you wanted to see. This is like when you were saying last season you wanted to see OMG EDG in the final. Well, what if it had been like this, you know, like you want it to be amazing, but maybe it would have just been crap.
Just because of how the two teams actually match up against each other.
Yeah, you never know.
It speaks a lot to kind of like the play style versus Fnatic and Alliance and kind of how they identified themselves. And, you know, facing someone like Roccat who is... I don't even know like the word for them. I think like bizarre. They're just bizarre in some of the things that they do and how they go about things. I don't know. I guess that's all I can really say about Roccat. I just like their creativity. I like how they approach certain team fights. Again, I'm all about like the team fights, and I saw that Zilean play on Overpow, and I was just like, yes, that is the Zilean player that we needed. That one little tiny play.
But if the semi-final against SK kind of brought you down, like, oh, maybe the Alliance hype, it's not, you know, what is that? Like, this team they're playing isn't full of all-stars and they still almost lost. Didn't the final boost you up again? Like, a lot of the problems that Alliance had in the semi looked like were gone in the final, right? Shook was doing fine. He wasn't getting shook, as his name says. Everyone else was contributing a bit, at least. It wasn't just Froggen 1v9ing.
The thing about Shook, though, is that he either, like, I don't know if he tilts really hard, but, you know, sometimes he's really good and sometimes he's not. And I actually kind of like Cyanide. I feel like there's always
someone had to.
Someone had. There's, well, you know, as a, I like him as a player. I don't know him personally well enough.
He's a nice guy.
Who gives a fuck? Everyone who sucks has to be a nice guy, Monty. You don't stay in the team if you suck and you're an asshole.
Like, I feel like, yeah, he's the weakest link. Like, I'll say that. Like, I like Cyanide, but I feel like he is one of the weaker links of Fnatic. I don't know. There's just something like I like what he tries to do for his team, even if he doesn't press Jarvan eventually, sometimes he has to, but I think he's pretty important to that team. As far as like alliance matching up, I think Shook just was on point for that finals. And I don't think we would see that consistently from Shook. And I think that was kind of the defining moment. Like if I had to think like why it was such a steamroll, it Shook was flashing over Wraith walls and just, annihilating Xpeke on his tower.
Like, yeah, it was brilliant, wasn't it?
But like he wouldn't be able to normally do that all the time. And that's like a big issue.
Okay, before we go, one last topic, just so we can get your thoughts. Because obviously that's the thing. Next week we can talk about anything, but you won't be here. So give me your thoughts. Give me a quick rundown of how you see the LCS NA playoffs going. So I'll give you the match and you give me your thoughts. So okay. Curse versus CLG.
CLG.
Why?
I think CLG is smarter as a team. I think Curse, when they find success, it's almost, I'm not going to call it cheese, because obviously like there's some thought going down there, but I mean the fact that most of their success, or at least when I was watching the games and they were rising up, Voyboy was like playing Tristana mid, like what Cop can't carry hard enough that you have to play the AD carry for him.
No, you can't, you're right.
Well, like that's...
if you're asking. Okay, yeah, continue. I sidetracked you a bit there.
I think CLG better jungler. I think Dexter's smarter about things that he does. I think Link is a better mid laner. Like I think across the board, if I were just to go down the player positions, that CLG just has better players in pretty much every facet. In my personal opinion, it's obviously very biased, but I mean, I honestly feel that Link outclasses Voyboy.
Oh, as a quick side point, Monty, to bring you in, the backlash of last week's show and the thing about Voyboy, it wasn't even just what's crazy about this is if you remember on the show, there's a moment which I even put in the highlight video. I had someone put it in there where I ask you, so does that mean Voyboy is overrated? And you say, well, no, who's overrating Voyboy? And at the time, I thought people were on the same page as me. And I said, well, oh, no, actually, you're right. I misspoke. No one rates him as good. So no one is overrated. You're right. Okay, he's just what we all thought he was. But actually, that was the part people had a backlash against Monty. It wasn't that we were being mean to Voyboy. People think, including Dominate and other people think we've actually short-sold Voyboy. That he's actually, he improved over the split, and now he's a really good mid lane. He's better than Shifter. He's maybe third or fourth best mid. He's actually really on the rise, and he's had a really good thing. Listen, people can say what they like about me. You watched all of LCSNA just about. What do you think on this topic? Have we short-sold him at all?
Are you asking me or Monty?
Monty first.
He's a mediocre mid laner that has improved somewhat over the course of the season, but he's shown that he's only proficient on a very small number of mid laners. He doesn't have a big champion pool. I don't know what to say. Put your money where your mouth is, Voyboy. We'll see you in the playoffs.
What do you think, Froskurinn?
I mean, I think if we're going to like create like valid bullet points and give information, sure. Yeah, champion pool is a big one. His champion pool is also very kind of off meta, and you have to think if he's facing down Link has a pretty sizable champion pool, and he can play a lot of different he's a very versatile mid laner. When your mid laner can say, it's fine, let Kassadin through, and CLG has like great success against that, and it's just due to that guy, like that's a huge tool.
I think there was some stat like Link had won on like 9 champions this split or something. Oh, by the way, Froggen won on some... Yeah?
Link's always had an adaptive champion pool. That's just how he is. He's a really, really adaptable player.
Oh, and by the way, I think Froggen's won on something like 11 champions this season. So, just get at me, cool. If you're out there, we'll see you at Worlds, motherfucker.
The cool 1v1 with Froggen.
Let me think. Okay, so the other playoff match is Dignitas against TSM. Now, I know deep down you're a big TSM fan, and so it's going to be very hard for you, and you want to believe that TSM can win because you're such a fan of everything Reginald represents and the organization, the class acts, but what do you actually think about how the games will go?
Let's see. It's Cutie Pie and Kiwi Kid versus Lust Boy and Wild Turtle. I'm going to give that to the Wild Boys. It's Shifter versus Bjergsen. Probably... The thing about Shifter, though, is that his champion pool is bizarre. Now that Ari's kind of come back into his swing, I think that's a buff to him. But we'll see if he actually pulls it out. Because for some reason, Shifter, we're all saying, just play Ari, just play Ari. He's like, oh, Syndra. No, that's not what we said. Trying to think of the top laners right now. Someone remind me. And junglers.
Dyrus
and Zion.
Zion Spartan.
I'm gonna give that to Zion. The thing about Dyrus is I think he's almost kind of past his prime. I say this tentatively. I think Dyrus is really good at being like a versatile top laner as far as like he'll almost do anything for TSM. Like if they need the tank, if they need the Karthus top lane, like he'll just, okay, I'll play Karthus top lane. Zion though, like his style, and I think the meta shifting back into to traditional lanes really favors Zion. Again, I think it's hard to overcome that bot lane. As much as I love Cutie Pie, he's not.
Okay, but the junglers, you've got Crumbs, and then you've got the man who's won on like 2 champions and won 1 game on anything else.
It's to me that
the battle of the inconsistent jungler. Who knows? It's a crapshoot.
To me, that comes down to the 2v2, the mid lane jungle combo, and frankly, if Shifter shows up, I think he is superior than Bjergsen, my personal opinion. So I think like the Crumb Shifter. But again, it depends on what Shifter shows up. I feel like he's pretty tilty or maybe an emotional player. I know he gets like really down on himself, so we'll see.
You know what's great about that, by the way, Monty, is that when we had Crumbs on and he was complaining like, oh, I hate jungling right now. There's only 4 champions you can play. You can imagine Amazing cutting in like, you mean 2, right? There's only 2. There's only 2 that are even viable right now. Anyway, yeah, just a joke, obviously. Okay, so since we won't have you here when the playoffs play out, so in your mind, we've got Dig wins that, and then we've got... Wait. Didn't you say Dig wins?
No, she didn't say anything.
Oh, that's right, I didn't. I'm going to say Dig.
I said 55% Dig. I'm really unsure as to who's going to win that one. I think that's going to be close.
I think it's Dig's game to lose, in all honesty. I think that they can only beat themselves, and particularly in the mid lane, because I feel like it's Team Coast carries Dignitas.
So now we go into the semis. You've got CLG go against Cloud9. Now, I'm not even going to say anything. What do you think? As a big CLG fan, you know, just to put that out there.
I would be interested to see, because Sneaky has improved a lot. That said, I think that the Lemon Nation versus Afromoo, I feel like Afromoo is much stronger in that case. And Doublelift is, I mean, if you think about like consistency, I feel like Doublelift is probably one of the most consistent players in the North American LCS. He'll consistently, you know, run into 5 people, but he'll also consistently play well. Mid lane, that's Link versus High. High's champion pool is just not anything right now against kind of the versatility of Link. And then Meteos versus Dexter.
I've got a little factor for you to add into that equation, though.
Give it to me.
This isn't LCS regular season. This is in the playoffs.
Oh.
This is the playoffs.
Cloud9's playoff record is pretty gross, isn't it?
Plus, High and Link's performances in playoffs, pretty different.
Yeah, what's the stat on it? Give it to me.
Well,
before I throw some numbers down.
Well, for a start off, I think Link's won like what, 1 playoff series ever. Yeah, I think he's won something like 3 maps ever in LCS playoffs.
I think he's gotten a lot better though.
Oh, okay. Why do you think so?
Because sometimes I just see like brilliant moments from Link, like when he plays Twisted Fate. Sometimes. And then I'm like, yes, that was the mid laner that Link was supposed to be. Because I feel like watching him, when he first got picked up by CLG, I was like, he's way too passive. He doesn't really do anything. He doesn't contribute a lot. I mean, that guy's just going to get run around. And now he's starting to, you know, occasionally he'll play games where he's the deciding factor there. And the fact that his champion pool has really grown, I think is strong for him. And High, I feel like, is actually on kind of a downturn. So like if I continue with my theory that I think like Link has gotten better over time, even though, you know, he's had some of those stall outs, and I feel like again High really has not found a lot of.
Are you about to pick CLG to beat Cloud9 here?
Oh no, I want to.
Yeah, well, just go ahead then. Analysis. That's all you need. Analysis.
Top lane though, it's oh shit, it's balls. That's hard because like the balls got screwed by the lane swap. Like that really hurt Cloud9's momentum just because he's like so key to them. And now that it's back in traditional lanes, that's like where balls wants to be. I think he's like an amazing top laner for NA. Against Sarah.
You think he'll be close, right? It's a best of 5, remember?
Yeah, I think it'll be close, but I think Cloud9 will win.
Okay. On the other side of the bracket, you've got Dignitas taking on LMQ. Now, in the regular split, Dignitas won 3 of those games, right? So
it depends on what Dig shows up. Sometimes Dig is brilliant with their warding, and that's when they've beaten LMQ before. Sometimes Dignitas chooses to fight the stupidest fight, and if they do that against LMQ, it only takes one mistake. That's what
actually, Dig and LMQ were 2-2. Okay, that's pretty good. So you don't sound so certain though that LMQ are going to win.
I would give it to LMQ. I feel like Dig is too there's too much room for error there for me. Like they'd have to play like a perfect strategical game because again, Cutie Pie, Kiwi Kid versus even more and Vasily. If that comes to a 5v5, I don't think they have enough power points across the board to deal with an LMQ team fight. So again, that's counting on Dignitas to play a strategical game all of the way through, not screw up once.
So then in your projected final, it's C9 LMQ.
Yes.
And who wins that?
I'll give it to Cloud9.
And who would win the third place game? Who's your third team going to Worlds? It's out of Dig or CLG?
I'll give it to CLG. I think they have more threats than Dignitas.
Okay. Well, I think we've pretty much covered everything under the sun.
Nope.
So, no?
Guess what we
what
get
else
to talk about? We get to
Monte?
talk about group draw selection. There's been a lot.
You know how I love that.
There's been a lot of information about the group draw selection in the meantime because, I mean, it's kind of this show that stirred that pot to begin with. And
they responded
Monte,
to you.
Have you ever noticed how those announcements seem to be coming like an hour, a day after every summoning insight? Every sort of thing that would make Monte go fucking ham just comes out like just after the episode. How do these things happen, Not that we're suggesting anyone would ever rig anything and arrange it in a certain way. So,
correlation is not causation.
No, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
We have no proof, Thorin.
Before we get into the details, though, can I just bring this one small point up, Monte? When you announce, okay, we're going to do a group drawing, and it's actually already been done, guys, and it won't be filmed. That's really the reason it wasn't going to be it's already been done, okay? The group's done. We're not going to do it again and film it.
It has been filmed.
Yeah. Okay.
They have filmed it.
But do we ever get to see it, though?
Yes. They said they were going to release it. Okay. The most recent announcement is we have filmed the group draw.
Yeah.
No independent parties were present, not even a notary. Next year, we will try to align qualifiers so that there can be a live group draw. And whether it is a public or private draw, it will be conducted and audited by an independent firm, but not this year.
Here's the problem with that, Monte. When you say, like, yeah, but they did film it, well, there's your problem right there, isn't it, right? I mean, if anything, if a camera zooms right in on a thing and one hand pulls a ball out, well, what am I supposed? Does the other hand have a fucking newspaper with that day's date on it, and I know that that's the hand that that's editing, right? If it was going to be rigged,
they said they're releasing raw footage, so it should be minimal chance, unless they it should quell most of the conspiracy theories. The thing that I liked least about this entire endeavor, and I think
it's going to be the same thing I was going to say. It was their response suggesting that, well, who are these people to have? Don't you trust us? Like, get the fuck out of my face right now. No, I don't trust you, random guy I don't even know who has Riot in red in front of his name. No, who are you? What's your track record? Who are you? I don't trust you.
I think that it's fantastic that they have acknowledged that this is an issue, that they are going to change it next year, and that they've taken the steps that they felt were reasonable in order to get the raw footage out there of the group draw in order to quell this doubt. My biggest problem was Magus' Reddit response that said, basically, well, the conspiracy theorists are going to say it anyway, so why even bother? I was like, that's not competitive integrity right there. That's not. It doesn't matter. Like, you could just throw any logic out, any reasoning out like that. Well, these people are going to say it anyway, so why bother? let me get the exact quote, because this is, I'm not going to like misquote this because that's lame. Yeah. So I do think that I want to underscore this point that I do really like the direction that Riot is taking the group draws next year. I think that the message has been received. It will be taken seriously. Love the fact that private, public, third-party auditor, that they are going to try and align the regionals. So not only that, it was also mentioned in the latest article by Nick Allen that they're going to try and give teams more practice time before Worlds, and we don't have this like giant crunch right beforehand that prevents there from being a live draw that kind of created this situation. And so I think that all this is fantastic. Love that they took the input from the community, from what we talked about on this show. Very happy. Now, this was the second response, though. The first response is what I want to talk about, which is from Riot Magus. That was a post on Reddit when they announced that it will be held privately and confidentially, before they announced that they were going to have raw footage released, before they announced their plans and intentions for next year, which reads as follows. Unfortunately, the risk of a leak is a huge deal to the point that we will not be inviting members of the community to observe. Only 3 to 4 people on the operations/logistics team responsible for Worlds will know the results of the draw to prevent any form of leaks. I won't even know, for example. If a journalist or community member were to leak it privately to a team or the public, it would undermine the entire qualification process and be a huge blow to competitive integrity. The risks simply aren't worth it to calm down conspiracy theorists. I agree with this. I agree that the Worlds group should not be leaked. I disagree that the opinion of Riot is that the professional journalists do not have sufficient integrity in order to keep this secret. I disagree with that. Knowing journalists and the professional journalists that surround esports, I think in my personal interactions with these people that these people have a lot of integrity and could do that. Riot disagrees. Okay, whatever. I agree that it shouldn't be leaked. Fine. The next paragraph. At this point, players are going to have to decide whether they trust that we don't have any intention to rig the brackets. This is a complicated tournament, and our focus is entirely set on delivering a smoothly run Worlds event. For those who simply can't believe our intentions, they will always come up with a way to insinuate that there is foul play going on, even in a live draw setting. Now, they seem to have reversed their position on this because they are saying they're going to do all of the things that will prevent it'll be an airtight, right? Great, fantastic. I disagree in the initial response that says they will always come up a way, and therefore it should not be done. I think that is really flawed reasoning and doesn't reflect an intention in order to do that. And that worries me. But like I said, the end result is we have this thing we're told they've taken steps already to get the footage. They are taking steps next year in order to change this system. That's good. But I don't like that the knee-jerk reaction is we can't trust any member of what they call the community, what I would call professional journalists. Professional sports journalists. That's what I would call them. I wouldn't call them the community, right?
The problem
I would say these are people that they're not random people. They are people with a professional code and integrity that they would be putting on the line, their careers on the line in this situation. Sure. And I don't agree with referring to them as the community or insinuating that they are not like actively professionals in this scene, even though they are not employees of Riot Games. And I also don't like the attitude that says, well, but the people are going to say it anyway. So like, what's the point?
Well, it's also, here's the problem with that, is the way it's phrased, because it goes on the attack against people who are conspiracy theorists, some would say it makes Riot sound like they're entirely in the right and they're attacking other people's character. Okay, what does it say about the character of someone who doesn't feel they ever have to justify themselves or even give evidence that they're being fair? And you should just, with no qualms and no reasons given, just believe they're totally fair and that they're doing everything above board. You don't even need any evidence and just believe it. Why don't you believe me? Well, because that's just like blind faith. Surely that's okay. I'll give you a classic Thorin analogy, one of my last of the show, Monty, that will again take us totally outside the realm of League of Legends. That's one of the most retarded aspects of people who think that like blind faith is a really good religious thing. Because if there was a God, okay, the way I looked at the world, if there was a God who'd created the world and mathematics and these things that are beautiful and the way they interact, I think that sort of person would really highly favor reason and logic and these sorts, because these are like the higher functions of the mind. He would really be out there. And so as a result, if you were to believe in him, he would only want you to believe in him because it logically made sense and you thought there was evidence and you could see that there was a design to everything. He wouldn't want you to just go, oh, well, I should just do it anyway. Like there shouldn't have to be a reason or any justification. I don't think that would be the case. So as a result, I would hope that Riot would want to be the sort of company that would aspire to have a community who could actually believe in them based on evidence and good reason and good faith and a track record. This would be a great scenario to be in, right?
But exactly. But what's interesting to me is that they went from that post that I just read to doing everything that the community recommended, or saying that they were going to do that next year.
Isn't that really just the Riot approach?
I was worried when I saw this initial post, and then they came out with an official on the Riot site announcement later that said, "We are recording the live footage. We will release it when the group draw results are released. Here is the system with the envelopes and how the seeds are going to be bumped. If they're in the same region, ends up in the same group." They laid it out. They laid out a practice scenario, and then they said, "We are changing this next year." And I was like, "Great, love it," right? But I don't understand where this initial reaction comes from, and that is worrisome to me.
I think the latter part, though, is the standard Riot approach, where when something happens, okay, that people don't like, you initially state sort of your reason, like, well, I think this is a valid reason, and I'm going to do it this way anyway. Then when enough people, especially Reddit seems to be like a fucking barometer for how Riot do shit. I've never seen one company run by someone else's website as much as this. A multi-million-dollar company essentially uses Reddit as like hot or not or something. And they're like, well, I think this blazer looks great myself. And then one person's like, well, I think it's kind of shit. And like, well, whatever. I picked it for good reasons. I like that color. And then eventually 1 million people voted shit. And the next episode, they come on in like a yellow blazer. Like, I've always actually liked yellow more than green anyway, If I really think about it, this is what I was going to wear originally anyway. It's not because you guys said it, but my rating's 7 out of 10. Excellent. This is what I'll be wearing next week as well. It's like, come on, man, have some fucking. If you really believe that shit you said at the beginning, have the courage of your convictions. Come on, John Kerry, stop flip flopping.
But do you think this is an issue of simply just a smaller, because large organization? I mean, is this just an issue of one voice probably getting too much of a box or too much weight to have that comment versus the official?
No, the comment was made by Nick Allen's boss.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
The comment was made by someone who, as far as I know, his title is Director of Esports.
Yeah.
So if this guy's going to know anything about esports,
he's below Dustin Beck, who's the VP of Esports, but he's above everybody else.
So essentially,
last time I was with Riot, this was how it worked.
So what's the title? Like, just break it down, because obviously I don't know that, so I'm going to assume that a lot of other people would know that, although I could be, in the minority there.
I think his title is Director of Esports.
So the Director of Esports for Riot made the statement?
The hierarchies at Riot are Esports VP, then Director, then Manager, then Coordinator. That was how it was a while ago, but I haven't been at Riot in a bit, so. So anyway, the point is that I appreciate that Riot did what I feel was the right thing in the official announcement. It just worries me that the kind of knee-jerk reaction is to just blow it off, and I don't think that's cool.
Well, who knows?
But in the end, it worked out, right? As long as it actually happens next year. But I believe that they'll do it. I have no reason to believe that they won't. And like I said before, I don't think Riot is going to rig groups. The only reason that I said any of this stuff to begin with is because I think that it is my job as an independent person who people like to listen to and who can push competitive integrity forward in League of Legends. I have a duty to speak my mind about issues like this because it makes esports have more competitive integrity for Riot, for the viewers, for absolutely everybody. These are steps that should be taken. And apparently Riot agrees. So, I mean, I don't have to sit here and do this. Obviously, it creates some friction in my relationship with Riot. But I think I should do it because that's what I ethically believe about esports.
And the thing is, it isn't clear cut that if you think that it was rigged, it's a conspiracy theory. Where's the evidence it wasn't? You don't just believe people on blind faith. Now, you might believe someone on blind faith if they have a track record of doing things in a really fair way and seeming unbiased and totally just for the betterment of everything and ideals held up. But I don't really know that that's the track record Riot has. When I look at the way they've structured tournaments and the way they've designed their circuit and the way they've kept certain countries apart, I think you could make legitimate cases or questions could be asked about the motivations of doing this thing. Now, whether that's the case, my point is, as long as there is a question to be answered there, then if you want to give, listen, Riot are the fucking god emperors of this world, right? They can do anything they want, and no one in the world can actually do anything against them. It's their game, they made it, whatever. But if they want to be perceived as people who are fair and doing it for good reason, then yeah, you have to provide some evidence and show what you've done and actually answer questions if people ask them, you know.
You know, for me, it's not so much about what has happened in the past, because from my perspective, Riot has created an incredible esports machine in a very short period of time. And they have grown so rapidly that there's just not sufficient track record for them yet to be trusted 100% completely by anybody. And I'm not saying they are going to do these things. I'm just saying they don't have a 40-year history of producing the same league over and over and over again and doing it in XYZ way. We've had changes in formats. We've had an incredible increase in scale. And that's resulted in some hiccups. And I know that the people at Riot are very honest and hardworking. And I've had conversations with these guys. And personally, I trust them. I just feel that it's my job to mention these things because I want to continue to push Riot to be as good, and the League of Legends scene to be as good and as transparent as it can be so that nobody can say shit about it.
Do we have anything more on this topic, or is that the end?
No, I think that's it. Like, I'm happy with the way that things turned out given the circumstances.
Okay, so to end, next week is LCS NA. When does LPL start? This week, Froskurinn?
It starts in, like 5 hours.
Okay, so when people see this VOD, obviously those matches will have finished, but you can go watch the VODs of those. You can watch them live. It's twitch.tv/LPLEN. You can listen to Froskurinn, and I don't know whether it to be every match, because sometimes they like some sort of like some kind of like Make-A-Wish Foundation over there. They have to let some like bad people do it for some games. I don't really know what's going on entirely, but some games she will be there, and you can enjoy those ones. And yeah, watch LPL, and then find out why your dreams will now be crushed by a second continent. The first continent, well, it's not even a continent, it's fucking 2 more countries, okay? You've got whole continents. They're just 2 countries that are going to smash all your dreams. But anyway, basically, Asian people, OP, end of the episode. Watch our YouTube channel. I don't know, fucking subscribe on Twitch if you don't want to see episodes anymore. You're not going to anyway. But
watch China Talk.
End of shit. Oh, yeah, that's right. Watch China Talk as well, because they finally figured out. If you think I'm bad with shit, Monty, they've just figured out how to actually get the full episode on YouTube. Like, only the first 80 minutes is uploaded time. And you'd listen, and they'd be in the middle of a point. Like, yeah, and another thing I want to say before. And then it's the end of. Oh, well, I guess that's the end. Anyway, it's the end of the episode. It's the end of everything. Hopefully not the end of my life. See you next week.